Chapter 2001. 1138 Planet Destroyers. That was the damage caused by the Vulcan's wrath. Such a devastating blow made the souls of the Burning Legion's Void Dukes tremble. It's impossible for a cannon of this level to recharge quickly. Let's take the chance and destroy this fortress, a Void Duke suggested. He was about to be slapped in the face. The elemental fluctuations of the opponent's fortress are intensifying. Obviously, the opponent's fortress is connected to the fire elemental realm. Recharging. That's fast. They can probably recharge a second time in 200 seconds, Eridar's analysts expressed their opinions. 200 seconds for one time. How were they supposed to fight that? The entire Burning Legion had less than 20,000 starships. There were only about 12,000 planet destroyers with assault capabilities. The rest were all normal starships that could not be equipped with mobile teleportation doors. They did not have much firepower or defense. They were similar to the starships that Neru and Willan used to lead the Dreamii to escape. They were purely used for transportation, but their strategic value was better than nothing. Usually, the army had strict limits on the damage of planet destroyers. If they lost 2 planet destroyers while attacking a normal planet, the commander's soul would be ripped out and sent to kill Jaden's flame cage to howl for eternity. This is not the end of it. I don't believe that the fire element on planet Azeroth is infinite. Furthermore, how can a fortress defend an entire planet? The Void Dukes did not believe it. They took a big detour and came to the other side of planet Azeroth. As expected, the fortress that looked like a small sun could not follow them. However, there was another dark blue fortress on the other side of the planet. It was almost black. Let's give it a try. This time, the army's fleet learned their lesson. They sent out 600 planet destroyers to form an umbrella shape. They widened the distance between the ships and slowly surrounded the fortress. Then, they ran into a fortress that looked like a hedgehog. It was a very strange attack method. Countless icicles condensed from frost elements appeared strangely in the void around the fortress, pouring firepower on the Star Destroyer in a way that had almost no blind spots. Don't panic. Switch to the elemental vision. The more experienced Eridar wizards quickly mastered it. When one's field of vision changed from ordinary light absorption to perception element, one would discover that at the center of this fortress that was roughly 15 kilometers in diameter, there were countless elemental channels of varying thickness and thinness that were like tree roots extending outwards. These twisting elemental veins formed a complex and ever-changing elemental energy projection network. It's the elemental passage of the frost element. The Void Dukes concluded. We can attack. The frost elemental was different from the other elements. It was not suitable to be used as the main cannon of the stronghold. Frost elementals freeze too easily, which limits their range, Mavelon's, Shivala's matriarch, judged. The Fell Lord, Zakam, made the decision. 2,000 assault ships as the vanguard, close in like an umbrella. The main force of the planet destroyers will hold the rear, and we will take this fortress in one fell swoop. The 2 satellite fortresses on either side of planet Azeroth were too much for the Burning Legion to handle. If both strongholds were there, the Burning Legion would be at a disadvantage. They could only break through the blind spot between the 2 strongholds. Not only was it narrow, but there were also other satellites. 12 satellites that were only 1 kilometer in diameter emitted a dazzling metallic reflection under the sun. No one knew how the people of Azeroth did it, but this mirror-like armor should not exist in the world. This probably had nothing to do with the indigenous civilization. It was more like a creation of the Titans. The mirror-like spheres glowed in a moving neon light, looking almost noble and elegant. But in fact, they were powerful killing devices that were connected to the magic net. Their existence perfectly made up for the blind spots of the 2 fortresses. This was also why the Burning Legion would rather attack one of the fortresses. If they chose to attack these small satellites, they would most likely be attacked by the 2 fortresses. After all, no one could guarantee that the stronghold cannons only had a range of 1,000 kilometers. The Burning Legion's assault had achieved some results. It seemed that the composition of this fortress was different from the other fire element fortress. The low mobility of the frost element meant that although the firepower of this fortress covered a wide range, the range of single-element attacks was very short. Ha ha ha. This fortress isn't that hard to deal with. Zakam laughed loudly. On the other side, in Shivala's fleet, Matriarch Mavelans had a different opinion. Be careful. Since the natives of Azeroth are relying on it, there must be a reason. Don't be like those rash fools. Even though the Burning Legion's fleet appeared to be advancing on the left and lagging behind on the right, after 2 hours of cruising and pressing, there were still 500 assault ships approaching the dark blue fortress that seemed to have a liquid surface. Attack. As long as we enter close combat. That's the Burning Legion's world. Zakam roared. Unbeknownst to them, a haughty and valiant figure in the dark blue stronghold let out a disdainful snort. She was Servana's. As an elemental demigod, she did not need to breathe. Breathing was a habit she had developed over thousands of years. Gently twirling her golden hair with her left index finger, Sylvanas remembered the name of this fortress. That bastard Duque was unexpectedly stubborn when it came to naming new things. Originally, since this was a fortress for her use, it had to be named Sin Dorii, or Windrunner, or something. In the end, Duque F** ked Sylvanas for 3 days and forced her to give in. Of course, Sylvanas was so prideful that she would definitely not tell others about this. She waved her hand. Izaran Fortress, heed my command. Prepare, Thor's hammer. The high-level wind elementals below immediately began to operate. Thousands of elemental circuits suddenly opened, and shocking elemental energy surged out of the tunnel connected to the wind god's throne. If converted into electricity, it would be a terrifying amount of energy measured in units of megawatts. When all the wind elementals turned into lightning and gathered at the forefront of the fortress near the enemy fleet, shock froze on the faces of the Void Dukes for the first time. Damn! What is this? Longsong cannons? No. This thing is even more powerful than the previous one. This time, a huge beam of light surrounded by purple-blue lightning shot from the Izaran fortress toward the Burning Legion fleet. Like a sharp cone piercing through paper, it pierced through the energy shields and composite armor of the assault ships and planet destroyers, causing a violent internal explosion. Small white light bubbles quickly appeared in space, and the people in the Izaran fortress could see this scene on the screen. These light bubbles extended into the depths of the void, and the energy waves caused by their simultaneous explosion looked like a galaxy. Of course, this also meant that in this instant, the Burning Legion lost thousands of battleships and millions of demons. Chapter 2002. Haha. Great. Well done. Destroy those damned demons. Roar. Whether it was the Alliance people who saw this scene from the monitoring center on the ground, or the 5 color dragons on standby in the Void Fortress, they all cheered and praised. It had been 25,000 years. There used to be so many 5 color dragons that they blotted out the sky. Under the effect of the anti-titans and the magic array that targeted the demons, the Burning Legion could only make minor harassment attacks. After the Gate of Darkness, the losses of the dragons increased day by day. It took too much time and energy for the 5 color dragons to cultivate an adult dragon. The war could not keep up with the consumption at all. The absence or weakening of the 5 guardian dragons led to the reduction of the restraints of the magic array on the demons, which in turn increased the losses of the 5 color dragons. In front of the demons who had infinite recovery power, this was simply a vicious cycle. Originally, Alexstrasza had already made a general mobilization order to fight to the last soldier. As long as they did not fall, the nature imprinted in their souls would drive them to do so. This was the corresponding price that the Titans had to pay to awaken their wisdom from the ignorant and primitive ancestor dragons and promote them to the 5 color dragons. The existence of the Alliance's Void Fortress perfectly filled the gap in the Void Battlefield's combat power of the dragons. The dazzling lightning ran through the front and middle of the entire Burning Legion Void fleet. Even though the Void Lords had scattered the formation of the fleet, the damage caused by the chain spread of the lightning still shocked the entire Burning Legion. The Burning Legion had traveled across the universe in the past 25,000 years and destroyed countless galaxies. The number of planet destroyers they had lost was only a little more than 300. Today was definitely a day of suffering for the planet destroyers. 2 shots of the main cannons directly turned more than 5,000 planet destroyers into space garbage. What made the Burning Legion even more desperate was that the Iserlohn fortress really finished charging in 4 minutes and gave the fleet a second shot of Mjolnir. At this moment, the Void Lords really knew that this was not a universe fortress connected to the water elemental realm at all, but a compound fortress connected to both the water and wind elemental realms. When the second shot of Mjolnir swept through the entire vanguard force and the core force of the Legion fleet twice, even the ferocious demons began to collapse. The ferocity of the 2 satellite fortresses disrupted the entire army's attack plan. Only Duque, Queen Sylvanas, and Kale, that's heaved a sigh of relief. They had finally tricked the army. At the end of the day, be it the so-called Condor City or Iseron Fortress, they were all products whose technology was not up to standard, and they had been forcibly made up for with magic. Let's not talk about whether the short-range anti-air firepower on the fortress would be enough after the enemy had broken through to close range. The number of soldiers in the fortress was definitely not enough to defend against any of the Burning Legion's demon divisions. The stronghold wasn't complete and didn't have a sealed environment. This directly reduced the number of races and manpower available. He didn't even need to think about it. He could only use elemental creatures. Low-level elemental creatures without intelligence could not effectively resist the demon army. It was bound to be filled with a large number of highly intelligent elemental creatures, such as the fire demons. Moreover, such a large fortress would require more than 100,000 short-range cannons of various calibers. Otherwise, there would be gaps in the firepower network. Once they entered close combat, they would still be finished. Furthermore, Azeroth didn't have an endless supply of elementals. The seemingly invincible main cannon of the fortress fired 2 consecutive shots from Mjolnir, which consumed 10% of the wind elements that could be controlled by the entire Azeroth. In reality, in order to maintain the balance of the world, the maximum loss of any element could not exceed 30%. Otherwise, it would cause the elements to become chaotic and collapse, causing another great cataclysm. Fortunately, because the Void Dukes had brains, they were stunned by Duque's all-out attack. On the second day, they gave up on attacking the 2 fortresses. Instead, they began to break through the blind spots of the 2 satellites. Those were the 2 meridians of Azeroth. What Duque had set up there were 12 evenly distributed small military satellites that were worn outside the planet like a necklace. These military satellites, which were modified from asteroids that Alen had captured, were not connected to the elemental realm, but to the magic net. Thus, the ones who actually controlled the satellites were the heroic spirits of the magic net, led by Khadgar. These military satellites had 360-degree attack capabilities. Long-range frost arrows, arcane beam cannons, flame blast throwers, flaming storm generators. There were all sorts of magical weapons. Moreover, Duque had set up heat absorption spell formations on these satellites that were also nodes of the magic net. They could use the sun's energy to replenish a large amount of fire elements. After being converted by the magic net, they could be used as a semi-permanent source of energy. With the help of the chromatic dragons, large amounts of wreckage of the army's battleships scattered in the orbit of the planet were collected. They were melted at high temperatures to form a layer of alloy armor. Of course, it was not as sturdy as the legendary pure mirror armor. However, with a silver background and a metallic luster around it, the satellites looked like a pearl necklace of the entire planet Azeroth. Moon God's Necklace. Duque used this name to curry favor with his allies. Magical weapons were more efficient in using the elements, but their power and range were not as good. Even the furthest attack weapon had a range of only about 10 kilometers. Even in the face of the Burning Legion's fierce attacks, the satellites had tried their best to intercept them. On the second day, more than 300 assault ships and 100 star destroyers had successfully broken through the defense line formed by the Moon God's Necklace and the Chromatic Dragons, successfully entering the atmosphere. With regards to this news, Queen Sylvia, who was always looking for the best, was very anxious. Duque had the opposite attitude. Please, we can't build a perfect network on such a large planet. We can't even fit a single starship in. If we want to do that, we need to build a concentric cover larger than planet Azeroth to protect the entire Azeroth. Duque shrugged. Moreover, we've already achieved our goal of chasing the enemy to where we want them to be. There's no need to be too demanding. That's right. Entering the atmosphere did not mean that they could land vertically. Due to the planet's rotation and the resistance of planet Azeroth's atmosphere, the spacecraft would actually fly in a parabola-like arc when they landed. The final destination was already in Duque's calculations. According to the System Elf's calculations, all the Burning Legion spaceships would fall into 6 areas: the Western Wilderness, the Hillsbrad Hills, Tanaris, Azhara, Dan Moro, and the Northern Barrens. Chapter 2003. Anyway, every Alliance soldier felt that it was amazing why the Burning Legion spaceships that were descending on that longitude had to fly in those predestined trajectories. In the case of unsuccessful discussions, they could only attribute the reason to Duque being a powerful god who had mastered spatial magic or something. Duque was a bit bitter. He didn't know how to explain this. This involved a full set of laws of physics. In fact, even Duque himself didn't understand it. Holy sh*T, the system genie had calculated it for him. When Duque turned the system's calculations into trajectories and projected them on the big screens of the various Alliance war zones, there was a commotion in the crowd. Wow! This is really so accurate. Even though Duque had added so much black technology to Azeroth, it wasn't easy to create an ambush circle. In particular, the ambush circle couldn't be too large. Otherwise, according to the communication capabilities of this era, it was very likely that they would lose sight of one thing. No one could guarantee that all kinds of communication would work on the battlefield. Any ambush circle with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers was very easy to get into trouble. On the other hand, to limit the enemy's landing range was also a super technical job. This was beyond the scope of the system. In the entire world, only Duque could do it. None of the demons of the Burning Legion expected that there were still hundreds of flying turrets in the stratosphere of Azeroth. These turrets were often not big. On round stones about 100 meters in diameter, dozens of cannons were installed. Except for a magic cannon similar to the main cannon of the Dalajan 20 years ago, the rest were all anti-aircraft cannons. This made these turrets look even more like hedgehogs. The new magic cannons built by Oder were all controlled by Duque with the system. This was the same as when Duque played the Hundred-Handed Reaper back then. It was an enhanced version of One Man is an Army. The allies on the ground looked at the scene in the sky that looked like half of the end of the world. It was a long line of fire in the sky, like a comet falling to the ground after countless planet destroyers forced their way into the atmosphere. It looked like a meteor, but it wasn't. Just as everyone was silently waiting for the comet to hit the ground, a dazzling purplish-blue light shone in the sky. At first, it was a purple light spot, but soon after, every light spot blossomed with a brilliance like that of a star. When the light spots reached their brightest, clusters of light that flew diagonally upward against the meteor shower appeared. So beautiful. In the command center, Sally Whitemane exclaimed. The sky-defying clusters of light were straight, but the zigzagging flying battleships that drew huge arcs in the sky were like moths flying into a flame. It looked like they had actually crashed into the purple light cannons on their own. Bang! 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 In the night sky, countless dazzling flames lit up. The huge meteor suddenly shattered into pieces in the sky, turning into even more scattered and resplendent fragments. From afar, it looked like a fireworks display. But everyone knew what it meant. They still remembered the final battle between the Alliance and the Horde 6 years ago. The cannonball of the Alliance's battleships had blown up the Horde's old flying battleship, and the thick parts of the battleship had also turned into scattered petals in the storm. The only difference was that this battle had taken place at an unimaginably high altitude. Anyone with a bit of common sense would know that the further the distance, the greater the error. Perhaps because the hands on the turret had trembled and missed by a millimeter, when the cannonball had flown 10 kilometers away, the error would be more than 100 meters. This kind of unimaginable sniping could only be done by the commander of the alliance, who wasn't a true god but was stronger than a true god. In the various command centers, the alliance soldiers were jubilant. Long live the alliance! Long live Lord Marcus! In fact, if Duque wanted to, he could even destroy this batch of 1,128 army battleships in the atmosphere. But he didn't do that. This wasn't a war for him alone. This was a war for all intelligent beings in the Azeroth. If he alone could take on this war, he didn't mind the Alliance people standing at the side cheering him on. Unfortunately, Jaden would come. Sargeras would come. This time, there was no longer the anti-Titan formation suppressing their strength. When the experts who had stepped into the realm of gods fought against the strongest experts of the army, it was time for the mortals to bear the heavy responsibility of defense. In today's world where technology was changing with each passing day, 5 years was already a generation of soldiers. Many of the veterans who had actual combat experience had become sergeants or even generals. The ones who were going to fight on the front lines were the new recruits with no actual combat experience. Real combat was completely different from the simulated battle that Duque had the Eridar twins drag a group of captured demons with them. New soldiers had to go through trials of blood and fire in order to grow. How to make the recruits grow at a lower cost was the responsibility of every commander who racked their brains to complete it. Duque left about 10 planet destroyers and more than 40 assault ships at each landing point. Rumble. The assault ships landed forcefully, plowing a long trench in the fields of the western wilderness. The planet destroyers were even more anti-biological. They didn't care about the lives of the passengers inside and directly destroyed the planet. Without slowing down at all, they plunged into the ground with a loud bang. The huge bow of the ship, more than 200 meters long, sank into the soil just like that, leaving only a strange ball of light emitting green fluctuations on the body of the ship, constantly flickering. In less than half a minute, the green ball of light suddenly expanded and turned into a 3-story tall portal. Blue-skinned demon guards with giant axes began to rush out one after another. This scene was seen by the magic eyes that had been set up near the predetermined ambush circle. In the western wilderness, Marshal Jirian Antonsman waved his hand in the Death Mine's headquarters under Moon Creek Town. A minute later, the Alliance's counterattack arrived. Not only was there the routine bombardment, but there were also hundreds of flying turrets in the sky. These turrets had a completely different mechanism from the Alliance's warships. They were more like hedgehogs that attracted the demons' firepower. Not only did they have magic cannons and conventional cannons, but they also had extremely heavy armor. Alloy armor that was more than a meter thick was wrapped around the granite, adding a bit of hardness. When the cannons scattered the formation of the demon soldiers, densely packed mechanical creatures began to surround them. Other than the standard track tanks and self-propelled cannons, there were also mechanical beasts equipped with heavy armor, such as the lion type and the spider type. They moved with great agility, as if they were real creatures. From afar, they looked like a colony of marching metal ants that were about to devour everything in their path. This was the perfect combination of Odor's mechanical army, the Alliance's tanks, and long-range cannons. Chapter 2004. Mechanical gnomes and iron dwarves lacked intelligence, so the Alliance soldiers mixed in with the mechanical army were in charge. As soon as the battle started, sparks flew everywhere. Of course, as the ambushers, the Alliance had an advantage in terms of casualties. With the near-perfect coordination of cannons and infantry, only one mechanical creation would fall for every 10 demons. In the hills of Hillsbrad, Marshal Windsor, who was old but vigorous, was leading the warriors. Having become Duke's retainer, he had been coerced and enticed by Duke to join the ranks of immortals a year ago under the pretext of, for the survival of mankind. Duke controlled the number of people who could obtain eternal life very well. Basically, anyone who was above the rank of lieutenant general would be able to obtain an eternal life spot. Everyone looked at the young and handsome Marshal Windsor in the command seat. Even after a year, they still felt very strange. In Tanaris, Brigida Bendis was in charge of the battle. Azhara was Tyron's adopted daughter, the current high priest of the Night Elves, Chandris. In Dan Moreau, Muradin Bronzebeard was naturally in charge. In the barren lands of the north, Varrock Salufar led 100,000 orcs. Under the cover of the Alliance's cannons and battleships, they cleared the invading demons in an orderly manner. If the Burning Legion still had a boss who was rational enough to control the overall situation, they would realize the problem of the army: many losses, not many results, and they could not open up the situation. Unfortunately, there was none. There were many factions within the Burning Legion. This dog-eat-dog relationship meant that communication would not be smooth. The demons of other races could not wait to see the other races fall. It was fine if they mocked and ridiculed them, but the key was all kinds of concealment and deception. Those with large losses would exaggerate their achievements and then put a bunch of destroyed planet destroyers into the category of medium damage and heavy damage. When they returned, they would shove it to Morgr. If they could not repair it, it meant that the Morgr's skills were not good enough. The news from here was that they had successfully landed and killed 100,000 weak mortals. On the other side, it would be 300,000 or 1,000,000. What the hell? Fake reports were everywhere. The most important thing was that the only boss in the army who could control the situation, Jaden, was not in the position of commander. He was preparing to go to the front lines to take revenge for the past. During the Battle of the Sun well back then, a certain honest and reliable young man had caused him to bleed. His lower body was stuck, causing half of his body to explode in the sun well. He almost died. With only half of his body left, he hid in the deepest part of the distorted void and recuperated for 8 years before his body was complete. Then, he spent another 2 years to restore his power to its full state. When he came out of the mountain again, he saw the army in a mess. Those troublesome bastards were actually fighting amongst themselves in the warped void. In a fit of rage, the egg destroyed several high-grade void dukes and their forces that attempted to break through the defenses of its supporters and kill it. Then, it slowly reorganized its army. Naturally, he placed all the blame on Duque and the 2 Eridar twins who dared to collude with Duque, betray him, and set him up. After confirming the news of the army's return, Gemini had been worried for a long time. She had hinted many times that the physiological structure of Eridar females was no different from that of Drenii. Should they find out more about it? Duque had cheated many people and was afraid that Gemini would poison him in some indescribable place. Thus, he had rejected her many times. Gemini, who felt that her life was hanging by a thread and that she might be sold off by Duque at any time, worked even harder. With the help of these 2 spies, they managed to crack the army's communication channel's password in less than 3 hours after the army's invasion. At this time, a team of 500 people proficient in Eridar's language was nervously monitoring the Burning Legion's communication channel to understand their troop movements. It was these asymmetrical advantages that made up for the difference in military strength between the Burning Legion and the Azeroth Coalition army. This made the battle that the Void Dukes thought could be resolved in 24 hours become a long and endless overtime. Back at the Broken Beach, the battle was one-sided at first. After using the saturation bombardment to wipe out most of the demons on the beach, the Void Dukes could only be dealt with in close combat. While Duque was busy intercepting the army's landing spaceships, Varian gave the order to land. Dan retreated and went to Sardra's tomb to perform the resurrection ritual. The Alliance was actually racing against time. After suppressing the army's demons with the cannons, the Alliance's marines began to land under the cover of the Naga troops. The battle went smoothly at first. Under the command of the Naga, the Murlocs charged onto the beach. They used spears engraved with holy light runes to deal with the remaining demons. The lords under Vashj, together with the Hydrathian water elemental counts, attacked the middle and low-level Void Dukes. Even the high-level lords couldn't survive more than a tenth of Queen Vashj's lightning arrows. The demons that dared to approach the beach were all torn apart and didn't dare to approach. The frigates that had a lower draft and the floating cannons that were flying at a lower altitude pressed forward and used the cannons to kill the demons that were the largest and most durable. Just at this moment, a new enemy appeared. Rumble, it was an old friend that the Alliance wasn't unfamiliar with. Fell Reavers. The great warrior, Varian Rin, who was the commander of the Alliance at that time in history, had sacrificed his life in order to deal with a fell mech that was clinging onto the Heaven Breaker at the Battle of the Broken Beach. He had no choice but to jump down and kill the fell mech in order to cover the retreat of the Alliance. It wasn't entirely correct to say that it was the Fell Reavers that killed Varian, but the power of the Fell Reavers was undeniable. The 460mm large-caliber cannons were replaced with armor-piercing cannons. The TNT Holy Light Rune armor-piercing cannons that weighed more than a ton couldn't break through the defense of this terrifying machine that was 20 stories tall and powered by Fell Reavers. The terrifying cannons that could kill humans and animals within 100 meters only left a shallow dent of a few dozen centimeters. Who knew what kind of metal armor this new version of the Fell Reavers used? The Burning Legion, who were at an extreme disadvantage on the battlefield, suddenly moved. Under the cover of the super meat shield, the Fell Reavers, they fiercely pounced into the Alliance's troops that had just landed. They were like a hot knife through butter as they used all kinds of attacks, Eridar Warlock's evil magic, Doomguard's shadow bolts, Cerberus's anti-magic. Originally, there were already hundreds of landing ships on the beach with amphibious tanks. Coupled with Mimran's mechanical army, more than half of the beach was occupied by the Alliance. The Burning Legion's counterattack immediately had the momentum to chase the Alliance's troops into the sea. Chapter 2005. The Fell Reaver bent its legs, and the jet pack on its back spewed out green demonic flames. 2 seconds later, the gigantic metal body leaped high into the air. With its weight of more than 100 tons, coupled with the acceleration of gravity, when it stomped down, 2 landing ships that were relatively close to each other and had just lowered their shields were instantly trampled into pieces along with the tanks and soldiers on them. It was too fast. There were no screams, only the flesh and blood that shot out from under the Fell Reaver's feet, as well as the aftermath of the engine's explosion. 2 blood-curdling fountains the size of basketball courts were formed. Even though the Fell Reaver's legs sank deep into the soft sand of the beach due to the terrain, it could not offset the shock. Instinctively, the Alliance soldiers on the beach fired even more firepower at the terrifying meat shield-type Fell Reaver. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of bullets and arrows flying could be heard. In history, Varian was able to chop off the head of a modified Fell Reaver with a single slash, and that was because it was a divine artifact. In essence, the Fell Reaver was not really a high-tech robot. In the end, it was just a dark energy being draped in high-tech armor. Morger stuffed a large amount of mixed demonic energy equivalent to a low-tier Void Lord into the shell of a Fell Reaver. Then, the Void Lord would pick out a sufficiently powerful soul from the captured souls, and stuffed it into the Fell Reaver's intelligence core. As for loyalty, there was no need to think about it. Back in history, Arthas had destroyed many countries and captured countless souls. There were only 2 who did not succumb to Frostmourne's soul torture, Uther and Bolvar. The Burning Legion had destroyed countless planets, and many of them were once the souls of powerful enemies. Every race had its heroes, and not every hero had the willpower to persevere in pain and torture for 10,000 years. While the Fell Reaver was few in number, as an assault unit, its power was undeniable. At that moment, Duque snapped his fingers. Snap. It was an unusually crisp sound. In that instant, the surrounding generals all thought in a daze that Duke, this fella who wasn't a true deity, yet surpassed a true deity, just a snap of his fingers and half of the Burning Legion's demons would be wiped out. Actually, no. Duque snapping his fingers could only mean one thing: the Alliance was going to use their secret weapon. Those who stayed in the Naxxrama's Alliance headquarters were either lieutenants who acted as messengers and monitors, or staff officers with the rank of at least colonel or above. Many generals vaguely knew that the Alliance had a secret research that was like a bottomless pit. Every year, the Alliance spent more than 1 billion gold coins on military expenses and transferred away a large number of recognized outstanding researchers. The importance of this project could be seen from the fact that Master Craftsman Jurban was personally overseeing it. When Duque gave the order, they could finally see the true face of the secret weapon. The Burning Legion immediately noticed that the Alliance's flying fleet in the distance had begun to scatter to the left and right. A huge flying battleship with a grayish-black base color and two pairs of crimson wings, one large and one small, charged forward at high speed. The huge bow of the ship had a shape similar to the toe of a war boot. The most shocking thing was its size. The 320-meter-long ship was far longer than the 240-meter-long Bismarck. Such a huge flying battleship was enough to amaze the world. What was even more strange was that it used a different power structure from all the flying battleships in the Alliance. The ship's body constantly glowed, telling those who knew it that this was a battleship powered by pure Titan runes. It was completely outside of the magic net and didn't need any fuel engines. Goddess of Wisdom, Minerva, attack. Please give your orders, Commander. All the more important announcements were made by Sally Whitemane by default. There was no helping it. Mook just liked her voice. Perhaps this was what it meant to be a voice actor. Duque smiled at the few images in the magic mirror. Are you ready? Ready, a few voices replied in unison. That's good. Attack. On the huge body of the Goddess of Wisdom, 3 large cabin doors that were 10 stories high opened. The Alliance's secret weapon was displayed in front of the world for the first time. Officers and soldiers at the front, retreat immediately. Leave the magic mecha to the Alliance's secret weapon. In the radio communication, the Alliance soldiers were still hot-blooded and fighting to the death. Their duty to carry out orders immediately woke them up and resolutely carried out the orders of their superiors. Duque had been in charge of the Alliance for 20 years. The biggest thing he did was change the Alliance's military system. Orders were absolute. The soldiers immediately covered each other, found cover, and retreated. The magic mecha was also stunned. It sensed a high-energy reaction in the sky not far away. One after another, huge humanoid mechanical creatures were exposed to the sunlight. In particular, the pure gold metal robot in the lead won the cheers of the entire fleet. The soldiers on the surrounding warships all whistled. Praise the holy light. It looked like that robot was a large silver hand knight. Gold eagle head flying wing pauldrons, gold-edged silver arm guards, gold triangular chest armor, standard silver hand shield, all the parts that needed to be moved were silver scales, other than the fact that the knight was holding a large ashbringer that was more than 12 meters long and 21 meters tall. He looked like a fully armed version of Tyrion Fordring with a closed helmet and a mask over his face. On the other side, there was a giant paladin robot with a similar appearance. It was covered in purple-blue paint, which told everyone who the owner of this mecha was. Needless to say, it was the rare mutant Thunder Knight Gavinrad Misfortune of the Silver Hand. As for the one in the middle, there was a metal giant with 2 swords on its back, a belt with a lion emblem, and a helmet decorated with a wolf head. 3 voices sounded in the Alliance's command center. Tyrion Fordring, Holy Light Gundam, attack. Gavinrad Misfortune, Gundam of Misfortune, attack. Varian Rin, Wolf God Gundam, attack. Gundam, the common dream of boys and men, had finally been magically modified by Du and Azeroth. Strictly speaking, these Gundams were not robots. Because their mechanism had nothing to do with machinery or science. In standard terms, these were just giant exoskeleton mechas that were driven by the Titan rune magic circle and could 100% synchronize with the pilot's movements. With the mecha, would the heroes still need to fight the huge monsters of the Burning Legion with their flesh and blood? The Wolf God Gundam was attached to Varian's body. With a thought, with the help of the catapult, the thrusters on its back spewed out surging Titan fire. The 30-ton mecha was like a light tank that had been shot out by a huge cannon. It suddenly broke through the sky and crossed 5 kilometers in just a few seconds, descending on the head of the magic mecha. Chapter 2006. In the cockpit, William's armor was suspended by a movable bracket. The wolf deity Gundam mimicked William's movements and made the same strike. At the bottom of the metal soles, Titan energy shot out from the 12 round holes, producing a violent propulsion and acceleration effect. The mechanical arm, which was made of flexible metal that imitated the muscles of an arm, swung the giant beheading sword in the mech's hand and made a fierce slash that was as heavy as Mount Tai. The giant metal sword, which was exactly the same as William's artifact, Salamani, cut through the void and slashed at the back of the head of the fell reaver, which was obviously slower. Crack. The loud sound was like a shot of adrenaline in the ears of the Alliance soldiers. Half of the fell reaver's head had completely caved in. Although the Alliance's Gundam was only 1/3 of the fell reaver's height, it still looked like an adult fighting a child. Compared to the original version of history, where William was forced to fight such a huge monster with his own body, the situation was much better. The Alliance's Gundam was only inferior in size. Its speed, agility, destructive power, and even strength were much stronger. The metallic mouth of the fell reaver that had its head chopped off by William's Gundam opened and closed silently, as though it was about to let out a painful scream. A large amount of dark energy burst out in the form of a green slurry, splashing everywhere. It was obvious that it wanted to drag the wolf deity Gundam down with it as it headed towards William's direction. William did not care about this useless scum. He nimbly tapped the wolf deity Gundam on the fell reaver's chest armor. With the jetpack's ejection, the 7-story-tall Gundam swept past the fell reaver like a rock spreading its wings. The Gundam's size might not be able to win against the fell reaver, and it was afraid of a competition of pure strength. But compared to other demons that were also huge in size, the Gundam was taller. In William, beating up the Doomsday Guards that only reached the wolf deity Gundam's chest was exhilarating. On the other side, Gavin Rad's Bad Luck Gundam also began to charge forward. He ejected from the flight deck, and his first target was the back of an Abyssal Lord. The Abyssal Lord's bloated body, thick waist, and peculiar body structure meant that it was useless against attacks from the back. In fact, this race had always been used as a sharp knife for charging. Attacks from the back? In theory, that was the responsibility of the other demons. However, under the effect of gravity, the 35-ton Misfortune Gundam itself was the most terrifying weapon. High Misfortune's legs sank deep into the Abyssal Lord's back, and a terrifying force that could crush a reinforced concrete fortress was concentrated on the relatively narrow metal soles of its feet. Pooh! With a shocking explosion, the Lord of the Abyss's dragon-shaped lower body turned into a crushed tomato. The stinky internal organs and bones turned into shockwaves of flesh and blood when they exploded. Theon's Holy Light Gundam was the most orthodox of attacks. The Golden Giant raised the silver palm emblem shield with its left arm and charged forward with a ferocious shield bash, blocking the mechanical arm of the other fell reaver. At the same time, Ashen Messenger, who had been hiding behind the shield before charging over, slashed horizontally from left to right, deeply cutting open the fell reaver's abdomen armor. After landing, the Holy Light Gundam mimicked Theon's movements in the cockpit. It lunged forward, turned right on the tip of its left foot, and swung its left arm violently for a second shield bash. Because of its height, the attack still hit the fell reaver's abdomen armor. However, unlike the other two Gundams, the shield shone with a brilliant golden light, like the rising sun. Wow, Her Majesty is showing her power. Ever since Duque let his mouth slip, Gavin Rad, who had a loose tongue, also called Theon, Her Majesty, like Duque did. Theon, you. This was King Wa's praise. That's right. Most of the time, the Alliance version of the Gundam was just a piece of armor that made its movements bigger. If it needed long-range attacks or energy output, it could also insert the weapon in its hand into a special slot to enhance its attack power. After all three of them were wielders of divine artifacts. By the way, Gavin Rad's Wind Sword was still the Wind Sword. After Queen Sylvan released Prince Thunderin as her subordinate, she placed the soul fragment of his father, Al-Akir, into it. Its power was still the same. Theon's, Ashbringer, was already the strongest holy light amplification device. Suddenly, the holy light burst forth and hit the metal shield like a light cannon. The holy light that was enough to blow up the body of a low-tier Void Lord was condensed into a 2-meter diameter light beam. Then, it aimed at the wound created by the large Ashbringer. Boom! The fell reaver's body was directly pierced through. Under the powerful impact, the huge fell reaver curled up like a cooked shrimp. In the blink of an eye, its mountain-like body flew straight up into the sky like a home run in a baseball. It flew straight up to a height of 100 meters before losing its momentum and falling in a parabola. Boom! The heavy body flew to the gravel by the beach and exploded like a shockwave. Sand and gravel flew everywhere. Oh, oh, oh. The Alliance soldiers cheered in amazement. That was not the end. The Golden Gundam leaped high into the air and used the force of the jump to crush the fell Reaver's head. Poof! The dark power liquid splattered everywhere. It was like the final cry of this huge creature made of dark power. The fell Reaver's limbs lost power and collapsed into the gravel and mud. Oh, oh, oh. Long live the Alliance. Without needing anyone to say anything, the Alliance soldiers who had been holding back immediately charged again. With the 3 Gundams as the arrowhead, the Alliance successfully established their first beachhead in about an hour. Of course, this temporary base built with 88mm cannons and diesel tanks as the main firepower was still too weak in front of the Demon Army. In history, in order to fight for the control of strategic locations on the Broken Beach and even the entire Broken Islands, the Alliance and the Horde almost shed their last drop of blood. The problem was that before the war started, there was no way to enter this area to set up a defense, which made the Alliance and the Horde look more like invaders. Since the commander was changed to Duque, and there was no longer any hindrance from the Horde, Duque, who knew about all this, naturally had a new response. Under the cover of tens of thousands of airships and fleets on the sea, the 2 islands began to slowly cruise toward the Broken Beach. One of the islands was not unfamiliar to everyone. It was one of the Pandren's nests, Shensi. Chapter 2007. Duque persuaded Old Shen and Xiaohao to let Shenzhen take the risk to participate in the first wave of attack, provided that the Alliance successfully controlled the beachhead. The Pandaren didn't want his old friend to take the risk, but this was a war involving all the creatures in Azeroth. Even the always kind turtle couldn't stay out of it. Therefore, Shenzhen's huge turtle back was full of the Alliance's mechanized troops. 2 full assault tank divisions were the Alliance's killing machine to attack the Burning Legion's position. Almost as soon as Shenzhen approached the Broken Beach and sent out a signal that he couldn't get any closer, the Alliance's engineers quickly put down the trestle that had been prepared in advance and put it on Shenzhen's back all the way to the beach. Tens of thousands of mechanized troops marched on the Broken Beach. Their participation directly suppressed the Burning Legion's counterattack. A large number of armored troops, under the cover of the flying fleet in front, occupied the entire Broken Beach in just 12 hours. This laid a firm foundation for the arrival of the second island. It was a mobile fortress fixed on more than 11,000 pontoons and floating cabins, covering an area of more than 1 square kilometer. Its shape was an octagonal fort up to 9 stories high, and now only had a reinforced concrete foundation structure. Even if the unnecessary structure was repeatedly cut, the total weight still exceeded 36,000 tons. Yes, the Alliance did have flying fortresses like Naxxramas and the Dalajan. But in a supermodern war, the importance of strongholds was self-evident. Naxxramas, which didn't land, was like the sword of Damocles, hanging high above the heads of the demons. Moreover, the flying fortresses also undertook the task of mobile support, so it was best not to use the 2 ready-made flying fortresses as the military fulcrum of the Broken Islands. In history, after the Third Dark Portal, the courageous Dalaran had acted as the forward base in every war, from the world of ice and snow in Northrend to the Broken Archipelago. In this life, Dubois had changed history significantly, so the Dalajan had to bear much less pressure. After the Dalajan moved to the west side of the Broken Beach to act as a barrier, blocking the counterattack of the Flying Apocalypse Guard army, Naxxramas began to help transport the mobile fortress to the Broken Beach. More than 18,000 steel cables hung from the square Naxxramas, and after fixing the cables, they almost hoisted the entire mobile stronghold. It was said to be almost, because among the 4 major elemental realms, the Earth Elemental Realm, the only one that did not undertake the task of outer atmosphere defense, had undertaken this advancement. The children and servants of the Stone Mother, Therazane, commanded over 10,000 Earth Elementals. They used their sturdy and powerful arms to carry the entire mobile fortress from the shallow waters to the shore. The Earth Elemental Army cast their unique earth magic and flattened the uneven ground on the broken beach in just an hour. The huge fortress came crashing down. Place the prefabricated steel column in the reserved cavity and pour cement over it to seal it. Like a swarm of ants, a large number of carriers on the sea and in the air swarmed to the fortress and covered the fortress with a metal deck and magic protection. Normally speaking, it wouldn't be strange for such a massive fort to take 10 years to build in the olden era. But with the help of Duque's modern management methods, black technology, and the extremely magical Earth Elemental Army, the fortress was formed in just 3 days. The Alliance officially named this forward operating base as Fort Courage. That's right. It really took courage to fight against the endless demons of the Burning Legion with a mortal body. Now it seemed that the entire Alliance did a better job than everyone thought. Sal stood on the side of a 230-meter-long flying battleship and looked at the majestic city 2 kilometers away that seemed to be changing every moment. He felt a lot of emotions. Did you see that? Old friend, I have imagined countless times, if I had suppressed the opposition in the tribe and did not hand over the authority to Gurus, would the tribe still exist? Obviously, the answer is no. Wajin came over and glanced at the Frost Wolf flying ship that the Alliance had specially built for Sal, and he also felt emotional. The incomparably majestic flying battleship was equipped with the Alliance's ultimate 460mm cannon, as well as the latest Eagle Strike missiles. Unfortunately, the orcs had a natural weakness when it came to operating high-tech weapons. Sal had put in a lot of effort to force this group of guys who would rather charge at the demons with axes and die to receive new knowledge and new weapons. Wajin secretly sighed and said, "The era of the Horde ended 6 years ago. As long as we survive this battle, Azeroth will usher in the era of the Grand Alliance. If we don't want to be destroyed, we should take advantage of the other side's goodwill and become a part of them. I never thought that our decision to join the Alliance was a mistake." Yes. Sal had infinite emotions. The battle between the Alliance and the Burning Legion continued. The broken islands in the middle of the endless Sea of Azeroth had several huge areas. The Alliance was able to obtain a strategic fulcrum on the broken beach, which was the lowest altitude and the most convenient to occupy. This was undoubtedly a very gratifying step. With this Courage fortress that originally did not exist in history, the Alliance could unscrupulously set up artillery positions in the broken beach area. Because of the increasing terrain restrictions of the broken islands, the artillery range of the ships on the sea would be greatly affected. This kind of fixed artillery position that could use 800mm railway guns was the favorite of artillerymen. With the initial success of the war, there was also a voice within the Alliance. Ha 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 ha. The demons of the Burning Legion are nothing more than this. Counterattack. The Alliance should counterattack into the Twisted Nether and hit the Legion's nest. Most of the people who said this were low-level staff officers who had a good background or family education, had just graduated from military academies, and had a higher starting point than ordinary soldiers. Of course, there were also a few soldiers who took the lead. For this kind of brainless idiot who fooled their own people and encouraged more people to follow them to die, there were too many of them. For example, in World War I, when the British Army first saw machine guns, the brainless British commander felt that he did not send enough soldiers. As a result, he sent more soldiers to die in an attempt to use up the enemy's machine gun bullets with their flesh and blood. For this kind of idiot, Duque directly transferred all the guys who talked nonsense to the broken beach front line. Within 3 days, more than half of these idiots died, and then they fell silent. The defending side would always be on the passive side. When the Burning Legion found that the hard bone of Azeroth was as difficult to bite as ever, the entire Legion began to adjust. Chapter 2008. Although it was a dog-eat-dog situation within the army, there were not many truly stupid Void Lords. Those with a bad brain would either be so powerful that they could ignore all plots and schemes, or they would have long since been devoured by the other lords without leaving even their bones behind. After the Burning Legion began to adjust their strategy, the Alliance did not have an easy time. The most obvious was that the Void fleet of the army began to use bait. Tens of thousands of modified spaceships that looked like planet destroyers began to attack the defense line in Azeroth. These bait ships had been modified by the MOR demon technicians. Be it the spaceship's signal or the appearance, they were extremely realistic. This greatly consumed the energy of the five-color dragons and highly intelligent fire, wind, and water elemental creatures. The enemy spaceships that broke into the atmosphere were not limited to the 6 ambush circles. Even though Duque was prepared and even deployed some of the spaceships to the rear when the front did not need so many spaceships. 36 air fleets with more than 1,000 warships were patrolling the 4 continents, but they still felt exhausted. At the same time, on the Broken Islands, the Alliance's advancement to Asuna, Surima, and Storm Fjord was not going well. More Fellmechs and Lords of the Abyss appeared on the battlefield. These thick-skinned mechanical creations and great demons were a destructive blow to the ordinary Alliance troops. There were more than 3 Gundams. Duque had customized one for every powerhouse in the Alliance who had reached the hero realm. Only these powerhouses who stood at the top of the Alliance in terms of reflexes and physical fitness could unleash the maximum combat power of the Gundams. As for the rest, due to the shortage of high-strength metal resources and the production capacity of the Mimiran workshop, the Alliance really did not have the ability to make more Gundams. However, Duque was already considering promoting a cheaper version of the Gundam, Jim. It was a huge mech that even the elite professions in the Alliance could use, mainly to deal with the Apocalypse Guards that were too large in size. On the 7th day of the war, in order to speed up the destruction of the descending planet destroyers, the Alliance finally began to send the god of the wilderness, Archivon, and the ancient dragons that were transferred back from the void battlefield to Azeroth, such as Krasis, who should have died long ago. The effect of training had long been achieved. However, the fatigue of the soldiers was increasing, and the battle losses were also rising. The more planet destroyers there were, the more army portals opened in Azeroth. Quantitative change could lead to qualitative change. If he didn't want the pressure to accumulate and eventually become the straw that broke the camel's back, he had to reduce the pressure in advance. I don't believe that the Burning Legion's planet destroyer battleships are infinite. Looking at the damage reports flying towards him, Duque cursed in his heart. War was like 2 ferocious beasts tearing each other apart. If the difference in strength was not enough to kill the other in one blow, then it was very likely to become an endless overtime. Either one of them couldn't take it anymore and was killed by the other, and then devoured until not even their bones were left, or both of them were so exhausted that they couldn't fight anymore. Then, they silently shook hands and went back to lick their wounds before fighting again. Just when the battle was at its most stalemate, the first piece of good news finally arrived. Tarim contacted Duque excitedly. Duque. We found Odin. When Duque heard the news, he pretended to be happy and didn't lose a polite smile. Putting aside the fact that this world was also filled with Norse gods on Earth, Duke was already doing them a favor by not creating a Lord Kratos. Just talking about Odin didn't interest Duque at all. That's right, at this point in time, Odin would jump out. 1. The owner of the Sky Fortress, the Warrior's Artifact Hall, in the World of Warcraft game. 2. The final boss of the 5-man instance dungeon, Valhalla. 3. The first boss of the Trial of Courage group dungeon. 25,000 years ago, as the most powerful and bravest guardian, Odin was appointed as the chief manager by the Titans. He had the authority to summon Olga to solemnly create Azeroth. While the Guardians were promoting the ceremony to grant the dragon aspects power, Odin was alone in the Hall of Ojua, deep in thought. His colleagues' disobedience to him, the commander-in-chief, made him furious. But what made him even angrier was that he was certain that the dragon aspects would fail to protect the world. To prevent Azeroth from falling to such a state, Odin decided to take care of everything himself. He wanted to create an elite army according to his wishes, an army that could listen to his commands and protect the world when Azeroth was in dire need. And in order to obtain the soldiers of this army, Odin set his sights on the powerful Vrykul. He had always been fond of the Vrykul's innate courage and strength. In Odin's eyes, the Vrykul's warrior soul was incomparable to any other Titan creation. Tyr, the king of order, and the other guardians returned to Ojua and asked Odin to give up this stupid plan, but Odin was unmoved. He was stubborn and believed in his own correctness, but when he invited the other guardians to help him build the army, no one offered a helping hand. Odin expressed that even if he was the only one, he was determined to complete this army. This was why when Duque and the others first attacked Ojua, the guardians said that Odin was missing. In fact, Odin had chosen a side hall of Ojua as the base of his army. After that, in order to separate it from the entire fortress, and even more so from the other guardians, Odin found a witch, Herria, a creation of the Titans that Odin had treated as his goddaughter for a long time. Thus, Herria weaved a powerful spell and enveloped all the strongholds chosen by the guardians. Then, she used all her strength to tear the group of halls that originally belonged to Ojua from the ground and rose straight into the clouds in the sky. Since then, the floating city's reputation as the Hall of Valhalla spread throughout the world. Odin occupied the top of the fortress and loudly announced his intentions to all the Vrykul. Those who died heroically and gloriously on the battlefield would be able to be reborn in the Hall of Valhalla, and the bodies obtained by their souls would be forged by an even more powerful storm. These warriors, these Verigars, would be the top guardians of Azeroth, and their achievements would forever be remembered in the hearts of all Titan creations. Now, what was lacking was a way to send souls to the Hall of Valhalla. For this, Odin studied the energy dissipated in the Kingdom of Shadows, and thus mastered the method to transform some of the Vrykul into spirits. This was the method to create Verigar. Chapter 2009. These Vagri were spectral servants that could travel between the nation of shadows and the real world, and were used to guide the soul of Vrykul to the Valhalla. However, if they became Vagri, it meant that they would have to bear the curse of being an illusion for all eternity. But no Vrykul was willing to sacrifice themselves to become Vagri, so Odin decided to take action by force and turn the Titan creation into a slave. However, this incurred Herria's rebuke. The dispute between the two grew increasingly intense, and the enraged Odin almost fought with Herria. In the end, Herria could only warn Odin that if he was still stubborn, she would return the Valhalla to Odin. To Odin, Herria's disobedience did not only threaten his plan, but also the safety of all of Azeroth. Odin, who had been overwhelmed by the fantasy of the Martyr's Palace, extended his hand towards the witch. Odin first shattered her physical form, then twisted her soul. Thus, the first Vagri in history was born. For a time, Herria's cries of pain and anger rumbled across the land of Azeroth, resounding straight into the center of the Nation of Shadows. This violent transformation caused Herria to be eternally depressed, but her suffering did not end there. Even though she hated Odin for his actions, she could not go against his will. Thus, under the latter's orders, many Vrykul who had no intention of doing so were turned into the cursed Vagri. For a long time, Herria and her Vagri colleagues led the heroic soul of Vrykul to the Valhalla, and the storm-infused Varair could be seen everywhere in the walled city. And it was Odin himself who gave them power and guided their training. Whether it was breaking off with the Guardians or turning Herria into Vagri, he never felt the slightest bit of regret. To Odin, everything he did was for the safety of Azeroth, and to pay his utmost respect to the great pantheon. Well, that's right. Odin of Azeroth was similar to the god King Odin that Duque knew from Norse mythology on Earth. They were both rather annoying. I don't want to give a sh*t about him. If there was something, she would try to ignore him if she could. Duque even had a feeling that if he could deal with the Burning Legion, he might even have to go to war with this fellow. Based on the current situation, this guy's strength was still indispensable. This was because his existence represented assistance from the Pantheon Temple, and it was also the sign of the era of picking up divine artifacts anywhere. The opening of a new hall for all professions was the key to upgrading the divine equipment. However, Duque rolled his eyes at the god of thunder. Tarim, we've known each other for so long. Don't you have anything to say to me? Tarim, who had never learned how to shrink, always maintained his giant form. He touched his big nose awkwardly. How much do you know? A lot. Mimiron told me of Odin. But I still want to hear your version. A person who played with lightning could easily become a straightforward person after a long period of time. Queen she did not count. Her job was to be the wind. Although Torim was embarrassed, he still confessed a lot of things. Basically, he knew almost the same as what Duque knew. Finally, he concluded, although we Guardians have had unpleasant experiences working with Odin in the past, Odin will not be careless in the face of a great enemy like the Burning Legion. He is still a Guardian at heart. Duque pretended to think for a while, then called William over. William, I have a mission for you. After hearing this, William was a little speechless. Uncle Duque, isn't it better for you to do this kind of thing? Odin is the chief of the Guardians, right? Duque shrugged. Odin is straightforward and doesn't like to work with others, let alone listen to others' commands in battle. And I heard from Torim that he is a pure warrior. He will probably get along better with you as a warrior. William was middle-aged and still a little hot-tempered. This had a lot to do with the fact that he had fused with Goldrin's soul fragment, which was equivalent to half a wolf god. But after being in a high position for a long time, he had also matured. He immediately sensed that Duque had a strange dislike, or perhaps resentment towards Odin, so William did not pursue the matter. After knowing Duque for 30 years, he also understood his temper. If he did not say anything, no one could force him. Then, what if Odin asks why you didn't come? What will you say? Duque rolled his eyes. Just say that because the highest guardian of Odin disappeared, I was busy cleaning up the mess of those unreliable Penishade dragons. I was busy intercepting the Burning Legion starships in the void battlefield and could not leave. Pfft. Hearing this, Torim and William both choked. After going around in circles, wasn't he still scolding Odin? Was this Odin's fault? Duque was really mean. Torim's face turned red too. In the beginning, it was Odin who insisted on giving power to the dragon aspects. In the end, it was the dragon aspects and the Penishade dragons who shouldered the responsibility of protecting this world for 25,000 years. On the surface, it seemed like the Penishade dragons were unreliable, but everyone knew that the dragon aspects could not have done better in the consecutive battles, including the Cataclysm. Duque was obviously belittling the dragon's slumber shrine and trampling on Odin. Torim glanced at William, who understood tacitly and returned a look. I understand, I'll just say the second half of what Duque said. No one knew that Duque had an even deeper grudge. What the hell, why was it that in The Return of the Legion, the warrior class hall was ascending to the heavens, while the other class halls were entering? The warriors were like immortals ascending, flying to the firmament shrine. When they turned back, they all looked like comets falling to the ground. They had the aura of a deity descending to the mortal world. Compared to the warrior profession hall, the other profession halls were at least one level lower. Duque also understood that the profession hall had to be in line with the identity of the profession, but the difference in quality was too great. The Guardian Temple of the Mages and the Chapel of the Holy Light for the Paladins were still passable. The pitiful bandits had to go to the sewers, and the Warlock Hall affected the appearance of the city. However, the warlocks and bandits had little to do with Duque. After deciding that William would appear, the rest was to set it up. Torim continued to narrate the story. We, the Guardians, knew that Odin and his adopted daughter, Hela, had been at odds for a long time, but due to Odin's authority, Hela did not immediately take revenge until the traitorous Guardian Loken found Hela. Hela created the underworld abyss not far from the Hall of Heroes and used all the means she could think of to take revenge on Odin. Hela's kingdom controlled the souls of the weak, and through a series of actions such as the creation of Kvarder and the formation of the elite Helagar, they fought against Odin's subordinate, Wagri. Chapter 2010. Torim continued, ever since Loken's betrayal, Odin has been imprisoned in the Hall of Heroes. Hela has been plotting in the shadows to seize the soul of his Varigar warriors. But recently, we received a message from Odin again. Odin is gathering mortal warriors for a final test, hoping that their strength and determination can turn the situation around and end Hela's rule. The underworld purgatory is only the first step of Hela's plot. She intends to eradicate Odin and obtain the soul of the Varigar warriors. So, our mission this time is not only to rescue Odin but also to defeat Hela. At this moment, Duque interrupted. This mission is very important because Mimiran told me that Odin seems to have a special way of charging divine weapons that can allow most weapons with divine weapon quality to be charged and upgraded to a higher level of divine weapons. I think this will greatly strengthen the combat power of the professionals in the Alliance. At this point, Varian's eyes lit up shockingly. Duque had long predicted an era where divine weapons were everywhere. Back then, Duque had analyzed it from the perspective of star souls. Things like, I've read all the ancient books in Karazhan and discovered that when a planet's star soul was destroyed by the Burning Legion, it even made a powerhouse who had just stepped into the hero realm become a true god. Although these theories made everyone feel good, deep down, they still did not believe them. If it was not Duque who came up with this theory, it would most likely be taken as boasting. Divine weapons were everywhere, and purple equipment was not even comparable to dogs. Would such a good thing really exist? When this day was about to come, it was actually quite exciting. How could one or two divine weapons be enough? Who did not want to have a full set of divine weapons? Looking at the excited Varian, Duque's mouth twitched. Although he was already a demigod, he could not avoid it. Mages and demigods were extremely powerful, but in contrast, the physique of mages was so weak that they were even weaker than ordinary hero warriors. Back then, Medivh, as a demigod mage, had also died. As long as one did not activate a magic shield or magic armor, and remove the elemental transformation in one's body, stabbing a demigod mage to death would be a piece of cake. How could they be like the thick-skinned defense warriors, who could still jump around like pigs after being shot? Mages were a contradictory combination of extreme power and unimaginable fragility. However, William was enough to deal with Odin. Duque couldn't be bothered to play the game of allies with Odin, who was a little crazy. Time passed quickly. The allied forces formed by the Alliance and the Guardians formed a tug-of-war with the Burning Legion. The army began to work hard to prevent the assault ships and planet destroyers from entering the Alliance's encirclement. This increased the pressure on the two geosynchronous satellite fortresses on the void battlefield. Overall, the number of demonic warships entering Azeroth had decreased in late April, but they had spread more widely. Even when Duque had sent out half of the reserve fleet that he had been holding back, to split the Alliance's starships into 36 fleets, it still felt like a mess. The demons charged at the Alliance without any regard for their lives. The Alliance had to pay a heavy price for every meter they advanced on the Broken Islands. By the middle of April, the number of Alliance soldiers dying in battle had exceeded 10,000. By the end of the month, the number had risen to 30,000. On April 22, more than 500,000 Alliance soldiers had died since the start of the war. And at this moment, Duque suddenly felt his heart palpitate. He was in the command center of Naxxramas, and Duque was dreaming. There was only one being in the entire world that could make a demigod daydream and forcibly pull his soul into a dream for a short period of time, the Dragon King of the Emerald Dream, Isra. Isra's usually soft voice had a rare hint of anxiety. Duque. Something's wrong. The Emerald Dream has been contaminated by an unknown force. Even Cenarius is not normal. Come and help me, you're the only one in this world who can help me, Duque shuddered. Wait. Isn't the King of Nightmares Savi's dead? No, it doesn't look like Savi's. I'm very familiar with his soul and the waves of the dream. In the dream, the human form of Isra bit his lips, his face even twitching slightly in pain. Don't pull my spirit. I need to go back and confirm something. Give me 5 minutes. Okay. The next moment, the scene in front of him suddenly receded like the tide. A stream of light flashed, and Duque found himself sitting in the command seat again. Duque. Duque. Duque, what's wrong? Jaina was the most anxious. I'm fine, but something has happened to the Emerald Dream. Isra just asked me for help. Duque's words shocked the surrounding Alliance bigwigs. With doubts, Duque opened his right hand and took out a divine artifact from the space he had condensed with his own power, the Tear of Elun. Duque narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. If this was the original history, the King of Nightmares Savis, who should have died and been revived again and again, once again using nightmares to contaminate the Emerald Dream. Many druids were corrupted by the nightmares, and even Cenarius could not escape the corruption. Malfurion Stormrage had lost his mind because Cenarius had been corrupted by the king of nightmares Savis, so he went after Savis alone. Isra was worried about Malfurion's safety and followed closely behind. However, everything was a trap set by Savis. Savis caught Malfurion and used the corrupted divine artifact, the Tear of Elun, to hit Isra, who was rushing over. The corrupted Tear of Elun entered Isra's body and corrupted him. Then, Savis took Malfurion away and allowed the corrupted Isra to destroy the Moon Temple. Tyrant Whisperwind, who arrived late, had a difficult choice to stop the corrupted Isra first and save Malfurion later. With the help of a group of mortal heroes, the corrupted Isra was defeated. Before he died, the moon emitted a beautiful light like a miracle and took away Isra's soul. Thus, the dragon aspect Isra had fallen. Unlike the annoying Maligos and the arrogant Nozdormu, Isra had always been a positive character. As a dragon girl, she was very popular among the players. During the Return of the Legion period, Isra's death made countless players sad. After knowing each other for so many years, Duque had saved so many people and changed the fates of so many people who were supposed to die. He had even saved Nozdormu, so of course, he would not leave Isra behind. He had beaten the crap out of Savis in advance and destroyed his soul. He had even persuaded Elun to let Isra give him the Tear of Elun. It could be said that under normal circumstances, there was no possibility of Isra being corrupted again. What the hell was going on in the Emerald Dream? What was going on? Chapter 2011. Magni. I have an important mission for you. With that, Duque handed the Tear of Elun to Magni Bronzebeard, who was glowing with a blinding diamond light. I'm going to the Emerald Dream. During this time, keep it safe for me. The Tear of Elun, one of the pillars of creation, cannot be lost. Magni stretched out his hand and took the artifact. As soon as he closed his sparkling diamond palm, everyone could see that his diamond arm had become almost transparent. The red solid artifact teardrop had actually passed through his arm and reached his heart. The big shots were dumbfounded. Magni's gaze swept across everyone. I'm sorry. I'm just a demigod of the earth. I'm not like a certain demigod of the elements and a certain goddess of the wind, who can still act like humans even after stepping into the divine realm. Everyone burst into laughter. Queen Sylvanas connected telepathically. Duque, I know. Duque, of course, knew that there must be a reason behind this anomaly. If it was just a routine attack, Duque wouldn't be afraid at all. However, this inexplicable attack was a bit of a headache. The history of Azeroth had long been riddled with holes by Duque. Some events, rather than fate, were more like the same choices that a certain leader with a fixed personality would definitely make at a fixed point in time. However, many events had already become untraceable. For example, Onyxia should have been dead long ago. She would at most turn into a zombie once before completely disappearing from the stage of history. Who knew that she would still be fighting in the void battlefield with the title of a dragon aspect? Another example would be William. At this point in time, William should be dead as well. However, with Duque's command, William had directly escaped death at the Shattered Beach. He was still the core and soul of the Alliance. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a card like King of Nightmares, Savis. This was different from Enzos's previous strategy. It was equivalent to a direct attack now. If it was in the game, Emerald Nightmare would only be a transitional dungeon. Those who needed to beat people up and those who needed to push the boss pushed the boss. Apart from countless players cursing the glass scum for killing our beautiful Isra, the Jade Nightmare was no different from other group dungeons. The Azeroth in the real world had a completely different significance to the Emerald Dream. The Emerald Dream was originally the blueprint of the Azeroth created by the Titans, but now, under the stimulation of the mysterious power of the unknown origin, the spreading corruption was now gushing out. If it could not be stopped at its source, the entire Azeroth would be surrounded by it. Duque knew very well what would happen if the Emerald Dream turned into an Emerald Nightmare. When the nightmare expanded infinitely, all the mortals in Azeroth would be trapped by it. They would pass out on the floor and have nightmares. What would happen if the Burning Legion's invasion was like a raging fire, and all the Alliance soldiers of the Resistance Legion fell asleep from nightmares at the same time? Team wipe. Big Brother. Needless to say, only by defeating the one who was the source of the corruption in the Emerald Dream would they be able to see the pure Emerald Dream again. If the other Alliance powerhouses went, they would have to work twice as hard for half the results. Their background meant that they had limited knowledge. When it came to knowledge, no one could compare to a transmigrator from the Great Celestial Empire. Duke had arranged the work on the front line. After handing over most of the task of remotely controlling the Void Fortress above the atmosphere to Khadgar and the other elemental emissaries, he directly lay down in his bedroom in Naxxramas's commander's mansion. He ordered his handmaidens, Vanessa and Solarian, "I'll probably have nightmares and scream. As long as I don't wantonly attack the surrounding Alliance leaders, don't worry even if I tear down the commander's mansion." Vanessa was a little troubled. "Then, when I sleep, don't let anything near me, not even my wives. Because in terms of power, the spirit can actually be unified with the material. When the spirit is completely materialized, the enemy can also become someone by my side," with her voice and smile, Duque emphasized, even though he thought that he might be thinking too much. It was better to be safe than sorry. Ever since he had transmigrated, he had persevered for so many years, and he was just one step away. No matter what, he could not fail at this time of the army's return. Duque arranged everything, laid down comfortably, and called out softly, "Isra." Almost in the next moment, he felt as if his spirit had encountered a black hole, and a great suction force came from the illusion, about to pull his soul out of his divine body. Of course, if Duque wanted to resist, the other party would definitely not succeed. A demigod against a demigod would at most be a distraction. After verifying that it was Isra himself and that he was not corroded, Duque let go of his spirit, allowing Isra to pull his soul. In the blink of an eye, Duque found himself in a strange, blurry, and terrifying world. The sky was red, but it was covered in a thick layer of dust. Countless buildings in the distance, as well as the huge land below, were lifted into the air by huge vines. Once upon a time, the Emerald Dream was a vibrant green. Even though there were all kinds of unreal illusions, it was always filled with a beautiful feeling. It was as if as long as he closed his eyes, he could sit in all kinds of beautiful dreams and soar in an absolutely perfect world. Now, all that came to his nose was a rotten smell, like a piece of fat pork that was bought and thrown in a corner for a week, emitting the kind of rotten smell that cockroaches and mice loved. Ugh! It was just a feeling, but Duque felt like retching. "Duque, you promised me 5 minutes." Isra's soft voice came. Duque turned around, embarrassed, and then got a shock. Old friends. Whether it was her dragon form or her night elf form, Isra always gave people a feeling of elegance and beauty. But the Isra that appeared in front of Duque was extremely weak. The Isra in her night elf form couldn't even stand steadily. Half of her body was leaning on a withered blood-red vine. Night elves always dressed boldly. Most female elves like to not wear armor between their breastplate and belt, because it made it lighter and allowed their skin to feel the power of the moon goddess. But the Isra at this moment, the right side of her exposed waist was like a tattoo of the worst kind. It was like using the worst heavy metal paint to pierce into the dermis, leaving a color of corrosion on it. "Damn, why didn't you call me earlier?" "I did. I thought of you the moment I got hit. This is, about 8 minutes in the real world." Isra smiled bitterly. But that smile was uglier than crying. Chapter 2012. It would be a lie to say that Duque's heart did not ache when he said that Isra was seriously injured. His facial muscles twitched as he looked at Isra, half of her body in a corroded state. Duque said, "How did it corrode you?" "Close the tunnel." "No way." Isra panicked. "My soul has already completely fused with the Emerald Dream." The corrosion of the emerald dream is equivalent to the corrosion of my soul. We must first find the source of the corrosion and destroy it. She was interrupted by Duque. Don't lie to yourself. At this rate, you will be corroded before we find and destroy the source of the corrosion. Do you want to be the third dragon aspect to be destroyed because of the corruption? Duque said. My duty, the Titan gave you the duty to protect the Emerald Dream. In other words, as long as the Emerald Dream is fine, it doesn't matter whether you will be corrupted or not. Am I right? After knowing them for so long, Duque had figured out the personalities of these dragon aspects. With that, Izura was immediately speechless. Stupid woman. Immediately disconnect your soul from the Emerald Dream. If not, I don't know if the Emerald Dream can be saved, but you definitely can't. Ah. But. Izura felt wronged. Her brothers and sisters were still fighting in their own fields. Alexstrasza was busy presiding over the void battlefield. Nozdormu was using the little divine power of space and time to resist the invasion of the Burning Legion from other timelines. Letting go Dan come over was already a dereliction of duty. Nozdormu would definitely not allow more demons to come from other timelines. In the end, the one who could help was an outsider like Duque. While Izura was hesitating, the corrosion continued to spread. In the time it took to talk, it was no longer just at her waist. It seemed to be spreading up to her ribs and chest. Stupid. Don't you understand? You're not a dragon aspect that you were born with. You're just a native dragon that has gained sentience. The Titan caught you to work. As long as you haven't abandoned your duty. As Duque spoke, he actually pressed his hand on Izura's rotten abdomen. Not because her body was touched, but because she was shocked to find that Duque was trying to seize control of the Emerald Dream. Izura suddenly understood everything. Duque, what are you doing? Izura screamed, and in his panic, even tears came out of the corners of his eyes. No, you can't do that. I know you mean well, but if you really want to corrupt and degenerate, I alone am enough. Azeroth should not have lost 2 demigods of the righteous side in one day. Izura's words stunned Duque. This is really kind-hearted. However, this also strengthened Duque's confidence in saving her. Enough. Duque roared like an enraged lion. Didn't you find me because you knew that I could save you and the Emerald Dream? I'm coming. I also have a way. Do as I say, so that we don't have to corrupt and can survive. You stupid woman, since you chose to believe me, then believe me to the end. He scolded Izura so fiercely that she lost her mind. Where's the password? I'm asking for the password to turn off the connection. In that moment of distraction, Duque had already invaded her spiritual world and shouted. Subconsciously, Izura replied in dragon language. Then, a second later, this strange and blurry nightmare world let out an extremely unpleasant hissing sound. It was impossible to describe what kind of creature this was. It only felt like some kind of carnivorous ferocious creature that failed at the last moment when its prey was about to be caught. Who? Both of them collapsed on the ground and looked at each other, a little dazed. Cutting off the connection with the dream and losing control of the entire giant dream space, they avoided the rapid expansion of the corrosion, but the already corroded areas still did not lessen. The stain on Izura's abdomen was still spreading at a relatively fast speed. Duque, your hand! Izura screamed in shock, because she saw that Duke's right hand was also tainted by the colorful soul-corroding poison, just like her abdomen. It was indeed a small piece of corrosion. Izura subconsciously believed that she had caused Duque to be hopeless. Duque. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Even you were infected. I'm sorry, I only thought of you in the most critical moment. I didn't want you to fall with me. I'm sorry. Izura sat on the ground in pain. At this moment, how she wished that the pain in her body could surpass the guilt in her heart. If she died, it was enough for her, and she even harmed others. She cried out loud, which was rare. She did not expect the Emerald Dragon King, who had lived for at least 25,000 years, to have such a fragile side. Duque gently lifted Isra's sharp chin and wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. He smiled and said, "The one who should be sorry is me. I should have shared a secret with you earlier." "All right. Now it's time to witness a miracle." Under Isra's stunned gaze, Duque's right hand became more illusory, and after a few seconds, it turned into a complete spiritual body. Then, Duque slowly reached his right hand into Isra's abdomen, as if pulling a piece of gauze, only to see large patches of spiritual corrosion being pulled by Duque from Isra's abdomen to Duque's hand. The tearing pain from the depths of her soul made Isra bend over in pain, but the continuous corrosion pain, which was 10,000 times more painful than the pain of the nerves, was clearly reducing. "Wait. Duque, this kind of corrosion can't be purified by the power of light." It would be strange if Isra was not touched that Duque took the initiative to bear her pain. Aside from being touched, she was also deeply worried. She was familiar with Duque, but they were definitely not the kind of relationship where she could entrust her life to him. An ally doing this for her made Isra's heart, which had been sealed for a long time, feel a little strange. How long had it been? Maybe 10 seconds, or a few hours, or a few days. In this strange world that had lost the concept of time and had become an emerald nightmare, Isra could not figure it out at all. She only knew that her heart was placed on the great man in front of her, who had become a god as a mortal. Duque did try to purify it, but he soon gave up. Isra quickly realized what was different about Duque. His soul arm was not like an arm, but more like the detachable arm of a doll that human children often played with. Without surgery or magic, Duque simply twisted a small part of the skin on his arm that was still intact. Then, a large part of his soul arm was removed just like that. Chapter 2013. It was thrown to the side like trash. In mid-air, Duque raised his left hand and chanted, "Destroy." A huge fireball that looked like a pyroblast appeared out of thin air and burned the entire rotten soul arm into ashes. This. Isra was dumbfounded. She was completely dumbfounded. "Yes, my soul is special. I can use my main soul to assimilate the soul and soul fragments that have lost their owners, turning them into a part of me. As for cutting souls, I learned it from the Burning Legion when I was undercover. I think you won't blame me." Duque's smile was light, but his confidence gave Isra a different feeling. "I won't." Halfway through her sentence, Isra, who was about to stand up, felt her legs turn to jelly. She fell into Duque's arms. "I'm sorry, my legs are jelly." Isra realized that this was the day she had apologized the most in all her years of life. She was extremely weak. Other than Duque, who could increase or decrease souls at will, any normal being would be greatly weakened if their soul was damaged. "Take a break." Duque patted Isra's back lightly. He suddenly empathized with her. If his power dropped and he became the useless transmigrator who had just arrived at the elven forest, he probably wouldn't be able to accept it either. Strength, glory, status, and power. Once you had these things, you would never want to lose them. Unfortunately, a boat sailing against the current would either advance or retreat. Duque had no way out. Isra shook her head resolutely. Feeling the stubbornness in Isra's eyes, Duque didn't try to persuade her anymore. He smiled calmly. "Follow me. If you're really afraid of getting lost, then pull my sleeve. I promise you, I'll return you a pure emerald dream." She didn't know where Duque's confidence came from. She was clearly the supreme ruler of this dream world, but Isra realized that at this moment, she actually trusted Duque more than she trusted herself. Was it Duque's miraculous feats that made all the forces of justice feel that Duque was omnipotent? Or was it that Duque's strength had long since surpassed the imagination of all existences? Perhaps, this was the trust that came with actual achievements. Isra followed behind Duque quietly like an obedient wife, one hand holding onto the tail of Duque's robe. Wait, this plot isn't right. Why did it feel like he was on a kindergarten bus? Duque grimaced and stammered, "Actually, I don't need to cast spells to launch my strongest attack. Oh. Izura seemed to be in a daze. She had been tugging at the corner of her robe, probably because she was afraid that it would affect Duque. But, now you're holding my arm like you're distributing dog food on the street with your boyfriend, and your movements are so precise. What's the meaning of this? What? This isn't suitable. Izura's strength was greatly reduced, so she didn't need to close her eyes to suppress her power. At this moment, she blinked her large, cute eyes. That innocent look made Duque's face bleed. No, it's just, sorry, I actually don't have much interaction with humans. I spend most of my time in the Emerald Dream. The people I knew before were all druids. They were too respectful to me, and I didn't know what expression to use to face them. I couldn't even talk to them. Duque was speechless. Was Izura an otaku? The human I talk to the most is you. I've seen you talk to other women like this. Duque rolled his eyes. They're all my wives. Partners? Partners in the dragon race are very loose. I don't really understand you humans. Izura said this, but she couldn't help hugging Izura tightly. Feeling the elasticity of Dragon's Peak, Duque really didn't know what expression to use to face Izura. She was a dragon. She was a dragon. This self-hypnosis was completely useless, especially after Duke had slapped Onyxia. He didn't think it was a problem at all. He suddenly wanted to die. Completely despairing, Duque decided to temporarily cut off the sensation on his left arm. For an elemental demigod with an elemental body, this was a small matter. Phew, letting out a long breath, Duque calmed down. Izura was surprised to find that the scenery around him was changing at a high speed. Ah. You know how the power of the Emerald Dream works? Just a little. Duque's humility seemed more like pretentious in the eyes of the dragoness. The scenery in front of him quickly dissolved. The dark red scene that was originally like a monster baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, no matter if it was the giant walls, the withered trees, or the layers of black ground that looked like solidified magma, all of them were like candles being roasted by fire, disintegrating in front of Duke with a scream. A ball of black ink suddenly came out of nowhere. Even though Duque had activated his ice shield, this mysterious evil substance easily passed through Duque's defense and poured onto Duque's body. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. It was like the smell of burnt meat. Miraculously, Duque didn't seem to notice it at all. One of the puddles of black water had already melted half of Duke's face. Half of his skin was gone, revealing his terrifying teeth and muscles that were constantly melting. Even though he knew that this was also a part of the Emerald Nightmare, Izura still frowned. Who knew that in the next second, a green light suddenly flashed? Izura was very sure that in the black curtain covering Duque's face, a large number of green bean-sized numbers poured down from top to bottom. 0 and 1, in the blink of an eye, the damage on Duque's face had healed without any damage. Not even a scar was left. How did you do it? Izura was shocked. It's nothing. I just understood the principles of the Emerald Dream from another angle. Usually, the world we know is a purely physical world with a physical shape. But the line between the physical and the spiritual in the world of Azeroth is not as clear as mortals think. Yes. Izura nodded. The Emerald Dream is the blueprint that the Titans left for the Azeroth. It is also a special space that can perfectly merge the spiritual and the physical, allowing the spiritual to materialize in the form of a physical object at any time. As long as we know this, it will be easy. As he spoke, Duque waved his hand. An exaggerated light shield the size of a football field enveloped him and Izura. Whether it was the storm outside, the volcanic eruption, or the destruction of the stars, it did not affect the world inside the light shield at all. The so-called corrosion is to change the victim's mind in this world where the spiritual can materialize. Tampering with the victim's memory, making the victim think that their soul has really been corroded and destroyed. When the victim believes all of this in their mind, then the victim is really finished. Chapter 2014. But no matter who it is, it's impossible to not be affected here. Izura said with absolute certainty. I'm affected. Duque tapped his temple and then grabbed with his fingers. His right hand, which had become translucent, grabbed and pulled out an illusory, human skin, that looked exactly like his face. No, it wasn't human skin. It was like a three-dimensional projection of Duque's appearance. For a moment, Izura thought that Duque was playing with a magic mirror. She immediately confirmed that it was also a spiritual fragment with soul material. I've made my spiritual see into a layered spherical defense system. Every time a layer is contaminated by the Jade Nightmare, I'll abandon this layer of spiritual shield. Izura froze on the spot and then said, but you'll still be damaged. Yes. As long as I stay here, I'll be constantly attacked by the entire nightmare world. So I'm trying to find the fulcrum of this world, or rather, replace the attacker behind the scenes as the core of the source of corrosion. You can find it? Izura was surprised. It's not that I can, but I've already found it. Come, Duque turned to the left, and Izura hurriedly followed. Duque slowly stepped on the somewhat illusory scarlet ground, but the scenery in front of him changed 10 times in a second. Duque's left hand pressed lightly into the void, and one huge landscape after another melted like wax in front of the man and dragon, disappearing into the void. The scene changed. Soon, the shadow of a towering giant tree appeared in front of them. This is Saradashiel? Izura was a little stunned. Duque raised his head slightly. What Dashiel? It was actually the world tree planted by a group of night elf druids, one after another, one after another. After the battle of the ancients 10,000 years ago, Azeroth changed dramatically, and the continent of ancient Kalimdor exploded. The druid survivors on the Broken Isles wanted to use the method of planting the world tree to cure Azeroth, so they planted Saradashiel in Volsala. Before the arrival of the Legion, although the Broken Archipelago was surrounded by the power of the Great Maelstrom, Saradashiel had always existed on the Broken Archipelago in peace. The Alliance had yet to conquer Sur Lama, let alone Saradashiel, who was in the Black Heart Forest in the northwest corner of the Broken Islands. However, in the Azeroth spiritual blueprint of the Emerald Dream, Saradashiel was safe and sound. At this moment, Izura saw a dragon. Her face turned pale, and she mumbled in a dreamy voice, Nisandra. Duque was also sighing. Nisandra used to be the protector of the World Tree, Sharadasil, in the Emerald Dream. As a member of the Green Dragon Army, when this mysterious corruption nightmare engulfed Saradahil and the Dream, this sleeping guardian was also corroded and engulfed. The current Nisandra was just an afterimage of the past. She was trapped in the plague and was ready to devour any fool who dared to enter her lair. Roar! It was a furious roar. The shadow of the green dragon could no longer be seen on this giant dragon. The once beautiful green scales had now turned into a deathly pale gray substance. It looked like it could be weathered at any moment and then collapse on the spot. Izura pursed her lips. This made her feel very uncomfortable because this nightmare dragon reminded her of herself as an ancestor dragon. Nisandra felt the presence of a threat. She spat out dirty saliva as soon as she appeared. Although she wanted to define it as dragon breath, it was too disgusting. The green, sticky liquid was mixed with a large number of large and small insect limbs. It smelled worse than the rancid water that pigs ate. This was also a type of corrosive spit. Duque reached out his hand and a translucent purple-blue arcane wall immediately appeared above their heads. He pointed his finger forward and a hand of magic the size of a tank appeared out of thin air. With a push, the arcane wall immediately moved forward. The swooping rotting breath was like a baseball that was hit back in the air. There was a clatter in the air and it bounced back at an even faster speed. Nisandra had no time to dodge and was directly hit by her own rotting breath. This made her, who no longer had much rationality left, a little dazed. As a standing beginner boss, Nisandra's special skills were really nothing special. If it was a country bumpkin at the time of the Burning Crusade, perhaps her rotting breath would cause enough confusion for a mortal hero. But that was all. Duque, don't torture her. Let her rest in peace, even if this is already her afterimage. Izura pleaded. Okay. Duque raised his finger and more arcane walls appeared around Nisandra. This was to prevent her from spitting out and launching corrosive attacks. Roar, Nisandra bared her fangs and claws, trying to use the rhinoceros-like horn on her dragon head to break through the arcane walls. Unfortunately, Duque turned his wrist and immediately an arcane rope of light that was at least 3 people wide appeared around her. It wrapped around her 2 hind legs in an instant. Bang! Accompanied by a loud noise, she fell to the ground awkwardly. She let out a bestial scream. At this time, countless green beetles the size of 3-wheeled motorcycles began to crawl out from the ground in all directions. They let out rustling sounds and surged towards Duque and Izura like a tidal wave. Duque snapped his fingers. An ice storm immediately rose. There was a series of continuous, ping ping pang pang, sounds similar to glass shattering. Looking diagonally above their heads, they saw countless snow-white chunks of ice being flung away. Hundreds and thousands of large beetles were instantly turned into ice sculptures. Then, even more ice elements covered them, turning them into ice cubes. In the end, they were crushed into ice in mid-air by the ice storm. With Duque and Izura in the center, it was like a crystal rain in a diameter of 30 meters. Countless ice crystals that were the limbs of the beetles fell down and formed a layer of ice and snow on the ground. At this time, Izura was shocked to find that Nisandra had stopped moving. The huge dragon body had turned into a huge ice sculpture. It seemed that only in this state could Izura find the beautiful shadow of his former subordinate in the past. Crack! The ice sculpture shattered. The huge dragon made of ice completely exploded into tens of thousands of irregular pieces of different sizes. It's over? Izura was still in disbelief. Yes. No pain. This was not a battle of the same level. There was nothing to brag about in itself. However, after the ice sculpture shattered, a bright orange light attracted Duque's attention. This is, in Azeroth, orange only represented one type of equipment, artifact. Chapter 2015. Duque had forgotten how long it had been since he had last upgraded his equipment. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Ever since he had become a Breaking Dawn wizard, there were very few pieces of equipment that suited him. The equipment of Pharaoh from the world of Azeroth strengthened a wizard's strength in the form of additional magic circuits. For Duque, it was better not to have equipment that gave too little bonuses. After all, his movements would be even more restricted if he had more equipment. Pharaoh's powerful destructive power and fragile body were the most extreme contrast in the world. If he couldn't use magic to defend himself, he would die if he was hit by an enemy of the same level. This was especially so for Duque, who had transcended and entered the divine realm. If it wasn't a divine weapon, then everything else could only be used as decoration. Return of the Legion was also the time when planet Azeroth's self-defense consciousness was completely awakened. It would distribute the stored energy of the planet to those who were willing to protect it. This belt that was flashing with a holy orange glow was the most typical example. Duque was very sure that before the Burning Legion came, this item was definitely an epic-grade equipment in Nisandra's hands. Duque had been calling the planet's will, but he didn't get a response. She must be hesitating. Duque could understand that a true god at least held some supreme authority on this planet. Once the will of Azeroth was transferred, it couldn't be taken back. The consequences could be extremely serious, so heavy that even planet Azeroth itself couldn't bear it. Duque wasn't in a hurry. Anyway, before the planet confirmed that Sargeras had arrived, she had to give it to him no matter what. If Azeroth didn't give it to him, Duque wouldn't fight for it either. He would just be a quiet, handsome man. However, this belt was obviously a little reward for him. With a wave of his hand, the belt that was supported by the arcane elemental hand immediately flew into Duque's hand. The moment his palm touched the orange belt, a description popped up in his retina. Eternal belt, the magic contained on it seems to be endless, just like the Burning Legion. It was simple violence and had no numerical value. In reality, equipment at the artifact level could no longer be quantified in terms of numbers. Just like the Atish, Guardian's legendary staff, that Duque was holding, if it was in the game, it would have been used as a decoration because its attributes could not keep up, or it would have been used to open a Karazhan portal to trap his teammates. But in this life, Duque had been using this drumstick, and he didn't feel like he couldn't keep up at all. A divine artifact that was suitable for oneself would bring a huge boost to any existence. Ah! It's a divine artifact. Isra was also a little surprised. This proves that Azeroth is getting anxious too. Duque took off the decorative belt that Aurelia sewed for him and put on the ribbon of eternity. The belt was blue in color, and there were 3 buckles that were connected together. In terms of aesthetics, this thing did not pass. In terms of effectiveness, Duque had to give it full marks. The ribbon of eternity, which was based on the Titan rune system, had power beyond Duque's imagination. It was true that Duque could connect to the weave, and in theory, as long as the 4 elemental realms of Azeroth were not destroyed, he had endless magic power. But in reality, it could not be calculated this way. Arcane magic, which was the Titan rune energy, was the basis for Duque to balance the various elements. What limited Duque's elemental magic was the arcane energy that could not be borrowed or absorbed. The ribbon of eternity was, of course, a little useless to the players in the game. After all, the special effect that required magic power to be less than 25% of the total was quite a pain in the ass. But in Duque's hands, it was a completely different concept. With the ribbon of eternity, Duque could directly control the total magic power of his demigod body by as much as 11%, which was quite a shocking number. This was not the limit. I'll charge it when I get out. As a peak demigod, Pharaoh did not need to slowly accumulate energy for something as simple as charging a divine weapon. If he was not in the Emerald Nightmare, Duque could fill this divine weapon to the brim and reach its maximum power in one go. Ha 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 ha. Duque was in a good mood. He had not felt this way in a long time. Speaking of character, many African players in the game had not gotten what they wanted, even after countless versions. For example, those unlucky people who could not get the undead horse no matter what. Another example was an African warrior called Recruit, who had half of the skull of imprisonment of the Windchaser and could not get it even after many years. Killing a random Nissandra and getting a divine weapon to pick up was really awesome. Beside himself, Duque subconsciously hugged the slender waist of the woman beside him and kissed her on the face. Wait. Something was wrong. Looking at the pair of huge dragon horns and green hair, as well as the cute face that tilted her head, Duque realized that he had kissed the wrong person. Sorry, Isra. I was so happy that I got carried away. That. Duke stammered, which was rare for him. It's okay. This is human etiquette to show friendliness. I saw Kalia and Alusia kissing each other's cheeks when they met, Isra said seriously. Duque was really shocked. Good. I managed to hide it. I just kissed her like I was in the harem. I swear to God, I don't have any special feelings for Miss Isra. Yeah. Next, let's continue to look for the source of the corrosion. Yeah. I'll listen to you. Amazing. Isra did not know if it was because Duque had killed a corrosive dragon's shadow with a slap that gave Isra a lot of confidence. Although her subordinate had died, she was still a little unhappy, but at least she had adjusted herself. The duty that was rooted in the heart of the dragon aspects was an iron law that could not be broken. Perhaps Isra would be sad, but in her heart, protecting the Emerald Dream was still her top priority. Duque waved his hand, and the surrounding scenery melted again. The scarlet scenery melted under a pair of huge flaming palms that appeared out of thin air. If it was a normal person who entered the Emerald Dream, they would have long been dizzy from the thick smell of corrosion. If they were not careful, even their minds would be easily corrupted, and then they would type GG amidst the laughter. Duque was different. The system had given him unparalleled analytical abilities. As long as he simply looked for the most turbid and dense area of dark energy, and then found the difference between the levels of corrosion and the turbulence, it would be easy to go against the flow and find the source of the corrosion. He gently pushed to the left and swung to the right. As if a new world had been opened, the next boss appeared in front of Duque and Isra. This is... Isra frowned. Ignis, the heart of corrosion. Chapter 2016. The heart of corrosion, Ignos, was a huge eyeball. His huge body could fit a frigate inside, and his ominous scarlet eyes would make an ordinary hero tremble in fear when they looked at him. As for Duque, I've even destroyed Si Thun. Who do you think you are? Just as Duque was about to make his move, the nightmare barrier on the left was suddenly pierced through. A huge spider-like monster charged into the battlefield. It looked very similar to the Mother Ashen spider that Duque had killed in the Land of Fire. It also had 6 legs and 2 huge front pincers. Its entire body was dark black, but the rest of its body glowed with a fiery red light. Duque knew that it was the other boss, Alarise, that could switch between spider and rock forms. Even Isra became alert after encountering 2 bosses at once, much less Duque. Duque, something's not right. No. It's just a normal reaction. The enemy isn't stupid. They won't line up and wait for me to kill them. Since they can't hide, they'll definitely choose to group up and see if they can kill me. This was like a minor character shouting, he's only one person, and trying to win with numbers was a sign of cowardice. Duque pursed his lips, but his expression was still calm, as if he was brushing off a speck of dust from his sleeves. There's no difference. I'll kill one, and I'll kill 2. Just as Duque was showing off, the space fluctuated violently again. Space fluctuated violently again. This time, cracks appeared on the right side of the airdrop barrier. Crack. Crack. It was a continuous explosion that sounded like glass shattering. Isra's green eyes suddenly narrowed, and a deep sadness appeared on his face. It was another familiar presence, Isendra, Amelise, Laythorn, and Taylor. Isendra, who had once been Isra's most loyal guardian, had changed beyond recognition. She had been corrupted by darkness and nightmares. If she was allowed to leave the Emerald Nightmare, it would only spread panic and chaos on the Azeroth continent. Her previous healing abilities were replaced by dark magic. She could release smoke like lightning waves and summon demon druids. Isolde and her companions had the ability to hypnotize their enemies into their worst nightmares. Duque sighed. As a transmigrator, he had done his best. Many Fallen or Fallen Alliance experts in history had their fates unknowingly changed by him, obtaining salvation and a new life. There would always be some unlucky fellows who could avoid it once, but they couldn't avoid it forever. That was what happened to Isendra and the other 3. As the 4 emerald dragons that were supposed to have fallen during the Molten Core era, because of Duque's reminder, Isra discovered their tendency to fall in advance and forcefully straightened them out. It was a pity that the Green Dragon Army's power bonus in the Emerald Dream had become a poison that accelerated their corruption. They were used to absorbing energy from the Emerald Dream, and when the Emerald Dream was contaminated, they were also corrupted into nightmare dragons. If Duque hadn't interfered, Isra would probably be the same. Seeing her subordinates and companions that had accompanied her for more than 25,000 years degenerate into hideous forms, Isra was heartbroken. She didn't want Duque to see her sad look, so she lowered her head, her chin almost touching her chest. Duque. Yes. Give them relief. Okay. Just like when a paladin fell into a death knight, his power was definitely stronger than that of an ordinary expert. Once an ancient dragon that guarded the Emerald Dream was corrupted, the danger it posed would increase exponentially. Duque scanned his surroundings. When he combined his spiritual sense with the system scanning, he was a little surprised to find that the fallen bear god Ushik, who was supposed to be a member of the Emerald Nightmare Dungeon, was not here. After thinking about it for a while, he felt relieved. The original bear monster brothers had their souls freed by mortal heroes under the decaying world tree. But that relief was only temporary. The place where their souls returned to was the Emerald Dream, where demigod souls could be stored. Thus, in history, when the Emerald Dream became a nightmare, the poor bear demon demigod also fell. In this life, Ushek and Ushek were working under Duque. Even their soul source had been transferred into the weave, allowing the two brothers to escape a calamity. In addition, the king of nightmares, Savis, was already done for. If there were no accidents, the Emerald Nightmare should be the only boss left. Is everyone here? If so, then let's end this. Duque snapped his fingers. For some reason, he just wanted to snap his fingers. Perhaps this represented acting cool. In reality, there was a deeper reason here. This was the Emerald Dream, a place where one could visualize things when one's spiritual force was used to the extreme. From the start, using some element to forcefully break into this space to destroy the enemy was not wrong, but it was definitely a thankless effort. Izura was indescribably shocked. She never thought that an outsider like Duque, after asking her how to use the Emerald Dream for a while, would actually master the trick of this special space in such a short time. Zzz, strange sound. A thick beam of golden light burst out from the ground, piercing through the heavens and penetrating the earth. As a witness at the center of the beam of light, Izura had no words to describe the terror of this attack. That control was too precise. She had never seen a light cannon that could be hollow. When the light cannon shot out, it created a small hollow area, which was like the eye of a tornado. No matter how strong the winds howled outside and engulfed the world, the interior was peaceful and quiet. It was precisely because Duke, the controller, was completely unscathed. The light cannon hit where the 6 huge bosses were. Originally, there were 6 gigantic monsters, but now, from 6 different directions, they formed a circle and firmly surrounded the 2 of them. Who knew that this thick ring of light cannon would directly cover the area where each boss was? The golden ring of light cannons broke through the ground, hit the relatively soft lower abdomen of each boss, the beam of light pierced through the sky, and the bodies of the 6 bosses began to dissipate within the ring of light. All of this took only a breath's time. It couldn't be said to be as fast as lightning, but it was still frighteningly fast. Izura estimated that even with her full reflexes, she would not be able to react in time. The most she could do was create an instant defensive barrier, and the rest could only rely on her powerful dragon body to resist. But the more she witnessed it as a bystander, the more shocked Izura felt. She subconsciously squinted against the strong light, and involuntarily held onto Duque's arm tighter. Bang! There was a sound that was completely different from the explosion in the real world. The attack that Duque summoned was like a new Goro crater in the Emerald Nightmare. Chapter 2017. This. Izura seemed to have lost the ability to express herself. This scene was too shocking, so shocking that it couldn't be any more shocking. She had been in charge of the Emerald Dream for 25,000 years. She never knew that such a terrifying move could be used in a spiritual world like the Emerald Dream. It's like... Izura mumbled. The main cannon of the fortress of the universe, isn't it? Duque gave Izura a confident smile. Yes. Izura couldn't help but nod. Looking at the scene of the ashes, Duque felt like he was dragging a literary girl to an art gallery to admire some rare masterpiece. If this was considered art, it should be a kind of performance art, or the art of battle. Duque chuckled. It doesn't matter if it's the Emerald Dream or the Nightmare. At the end of the day, it's a world of spiritual materialization. Imagination is the most powerful weapon. As long as the spiritual power in your body can keep up with the power of the weapon you imagine, then your dream will come true. That's right. Here, as long as a mortal believes that he is dead, then he will definitely die in reality. This law applies to all existences in this spiritual world. Even the leader-tier monsters in the Emerald Nightmare, if their minds believe that they will perish, then they will naturally perish. Duke gently led Izura forward, taking a leisurely stroll. As he walked, he admired the 6 giant leader monsters of the nightmare. In the seemingly dazzling but actually extremely gentle golden light, they were reduced to ashes. The shock on Izura's face had yet to fade. Every existence with demigod-level spiritual power had the possibility to fire a similar light cannon here. But Izura knew that there was not a single one who could do what Duque did. Just like the god of the wilderness, they had this kind of potential. But their extremely primitive life experience meant that they would not be able to imagine themselves using such a killer move. Without imagination, there was no higher possibility. If it were the raven goddess Iwina or the turtle god Tatora, they would probably be tortured to death by these 6-liter monsters in a few moves. In terms of imagination, Duque was absolutely different from them. His experience determined that he had more room to display his abilities in a space where his mind could be materialized. Izura let out a long sigh. I was right about you. Duque naturally put a hand on the back of Izura's hand. Yes, so you can trust me more. This time, it was Izura who laughed. Do I not trust you enough? When I was about to die, the first person I thought of was you. Duque was about to say something when he suddenly fell silent. As a transmigrator, he originally had no feelings for the remaining 1 or 2. They felt that he was no different from the other bosses. However, when the emotions of the people around him were mixed in, everything became different. Duque. Please save Malfurion. Tyrann's words echoed in Duque's ears. As the leader of the Night Elves, Tyrant had to control the situation. The Night Elves had a vast territory. Although they did not fight for every inch of it, they could not allow the Burning Legion to open teleportation gates in their territory. Tyrant could not leave, so she could only entrust the task of saving her childhood friend to Duque. To be honest, Duque did not feel uncomfortable about saving Malfurion. After all, this great druid with antlers on his head and his signature green grassland hat was definitely a good person. In this life, after knowing that Tyrant's heart belonged to someone else, Malfurion withdrew and continued to support Tyrant's work silently. Duque felt that Cenarius was the one who was troubled. In the past, when Cenarius was hacked to death by Grandpa Roar's axe, Duque would only laugh. But now, not only had Cenarius been corrupted by the Jade Nightmare, his foster mother was holding Duque's hand. This kind of bastard was simply speechless. Izura, let me tell you. Just as Duque was about to tell her the results of the system scan, the entire world suddenly shook. A red dot appeared in the air. In the blink of an eye, an ominous crimson color once again filled the vision of the man and dragon. Evil was spreading, and the rot was expanding endlessly. In the center of all the crazy nightmare aura, a 4-legged centaur with the lower body of a horse appeared. His body was tall and wild. On his lower body, on the horse's back, on his shoulders, and on his enormous antlers, there were many fiery red things that looked like crystal wristlets. As he walked, these fiery red crystals were like burning flames, trembling non-stop. Even his hair had turned from green to a muddy red. Izura covered her mouth. She couldn't believe her eyes. No, she had already expected this. Before seeing it with her own eyes, she had always held on to a tiny, tiny hope. At this moment, all hope was gone. Sina. Julius. Izura's voice sounded like she was in a dream. The corrosion of the Emerald Dream was too much for her. She felt like she had fallen into an eternal nightmare, unable to wake up no matter what. Izura, actually, I can. Duque, who had forgotten about this, did not know how to comfort Izura. No, Duque, you have already helped me too much. Izura raised her beautiful face, 2 drops of tears already falling from the corners of her eyes. Some things can only be done by oneself. No other existence can help. Duque could only respond in silence. 25,000 years. That's a really long time. As his adoptive mother, I watched him grow up. I watched him develop his own beliefs and become the spiritual leader of the Cenarian Circle. Maybe, this is war. Izura's face was full of sadness. Then, she gave Duque a smile that looked like she was laughing but was actually crying. Under Duque's gaze, she began to activate the ultimate transformation spell. In just 2 seconds, she changed back to her original form, that beautiful green dragon. Wait, the description of a dragon did not seem to match the current Izra's name. The size was obviously wrong. At this moment, the dragon Izra was only less than 20 meters with her wings spread out. Her body was only about 15 meters long. To humans, she was still a giant. To Cenarius, who had expanded like an inflatable balloon under the power of the shapeshifters, Izra's body was not enough, and even a little weak. It had been proven countless times that dragons did not have an advantage in close combat among creatures of the same body size. Normally, Izra could of course use all kinds of magic or special spiritual attacks to torture her opponent to the point where they could not live and could not die. The problem was that Izra's soul had just been heavily injured. Chapter 2018. Are you alright? Duque asked hesitantly. Regardless of whether I'm alright or not, this is my duty. Duque, you deal with the last enemy. Duque turned his head and instantly saw the void on his right explode. In that void, space shattered like broken glass, revealing a giant monster with an inverted triangular upper body. This head was more devilish, with the common curved goat horns that demons had. That burly body made it look a little like a barbarian soldier from the Burning Legion. It was a big monster like this. No matter how one looked at it, it didn't match the elegant and violent profession of Pharaoh. Others didn't know, but Duque obviously knew who it was. The system had marked everything. Savi's, afterimage. Duque suddenly felt bored. Savi's, it's Savi's again. Ever since the ancient war, he had toyed with this guy and ordered him around like a little brother. Later on, he had tried to cause trouble many times, but he had failed and ended up being destroyed. In the previous timeline, this guy had been tricked to death, and even a large part of his soul had been destroyed. At that time, the treacherous, cowardly, Enzos hadn't run out to pick up his remaining bones. To be honest, Duque had been worried about this and that in the past. But after becoming stronger, Duque looked down on Enzos. Other than scheming and causing trouble, this guy had never dared to jump out and fight head-on. When Enzos' flawless schemes in history were repeated again and again in front of Duque, this transmigrator, Duque just wanted to yawn and say, "Are you done yet?" Others might fear Savi's title of King of Nightmares. Unfortunately, in this life, Savi's power had been greatly reduced. His scheme had failed once, and this title of king was really lacking. Without the support of a powerful soul, Enzos could only create this toy-like giant and stuff Savi's remnant soul into it to make up the numbers. Under the system scan, Savi's remnant soul wasn't even 5% of its peak. The seemingly huge soul was filled with a large amount of soul residue from other unknown creatures. Duque. Marcus, I'm back. Sticking out his long tongue, he obviously looked like a demon, but Duque felt that he looked like a hanged ghost from the Celestial Empire, whose tongue was being strangled by an invisible rope. Sigh, I kill you every time. I'm embarrassed. I'll give you some special benefits this time. Duque snapped his fingers. Sarvis was instantly dumbfounded. Because a female titan appeared. No matter how large a giant's body was, if it didn't have a corresponding physique or special ability, it would only be a live target on the battlefield. Even if all the giant-sized guardians of Azeroth were to appear in front of Savi's, who had an incomplete soul, he would not be afraid, let alone a female giantess. They would most likely howl and charge forward to chop him down. She was definitely an exception. Because she was impressively Queen Azhara. That pair of long legs that took up at least 60% of her total height, that slender waist, that chest that was at least a ton. Cough cough, although it was a female titan with a height of 30 stories, the proportions of her body and appearance were 100% the original. Savi's was dumbfounded. Savi's, my loyal servant, kneel. The exact same voice, the exact same eyes, the exact same aura. If it wasn't for the fact that this Queen Azhara's size was really wrong, Savi's would definitely have thought that this was the Empress herself. Savi's thick neck seemed to be rusted to death. He turned his head with difficulty and looked at Duque. His expression was unknown, whether it was anger, pain, or sorrow. Duke Marcus, you're messing with me? That's right. I'm messing with you. Duque was very happy to be mischievous. At this moment, the giant version of Queen Azhara spoke again. Savi's, if you yield, I can consider letting you be my guest in the bedroom. Savi's originally small soul suddenly became incomparably messed up. Before the War of the Ancients, Savi's had already served the queen for close to 10,000 years. Even though Queen Azhara was arrogant and silly, she was publicly recognized as the #1 beauty among the night elves back then. Of course, that completely blue skin was something Dumuk couldn't accept in the past. Ever since he accidentally slapped her hooves, it didn't seem so unsightly anymore. However, even an outsider like Duque could clearly feel Savi's crazy love for the queen. Speaking of which, there weren't many males among the night elves who didn't like Queen Azhara. Perhaps the Stormrage brothers were an exception. It wasn't that Queen Azhara didn't know, but she was used to using her beauty to manipulate her admirers, making them risk their lives for her, and toying with all the big bosses in the palm of her hand. It was precisely this habit that gave her the confidence to think that she could capture the heart of the fallen titan Sargeras. Who knew that Sargeras would have such a heavy taste? He liked female orcs like Garona who could smash watermelons with their pectoral muscles. Other than his master Enzos, Savi's wasn't afraid of anyone. Now, it seemed that he had to add Queen Azhara to the mix. The real Queen Azhara was still alive and kicking in the Broken Islands, so she naturally wouldn't come here to spoil things. This was what Duque was doing with the Emerald Nightmare's characteristics. Don't you like your queen very much? Come on. Pretentious. Create trouble. I announce in the name of the queen that you are going to become a masochist. Savi's was about 8 stories tall at the moment. To a human, he was definitely a giant. But in front of Queen Azhara, who was controlled by Duque and was purely spiritual materialization, he was like a ball. A pair of long, blue legs stomped down on him. Savi's collapsed on the spot. Ah! Your Majesty, no. That. Duque used the system to project the Azhara in his memory, and then he controlled the female giant Azhara to abuse Savi's. After a few rounds, Duque was absolutely sure that this guy was an incurable foot fetish, queen fetish, masochist. Perhaps he had really played a similar unspeakable game with Azhara in the past. Anyway, after a series of Queen's Trample and Queen's Whip, Savi's typed GG amidst the laughter. Right. This guy actually had a satisfied smile on his face before he died. Duque held his forehead. Did I do something wrong? Savi's remnant soul, which had been infused with Enzo's evil divine power, was definitely not weak, but Duque had grasped his greatest weakness. Every piece of Savi's soul was branded with a twisted love for Azhara, which caused his already incomplete soul to become even more unstable. After a few rounds, like a sand sculpture on the beach being washed away by the waves, Savi's remnant shadow collapsed. Yes, it was indeed a sand sculpture. Everyone repeat after me, sand, sculpture. Chapter 2019. Duque felt that Enzos was extremely annoying. Disgusting, sinister, despicable, stabbing me in the back. What does it have to do with Enzos that the Burning Legion wants to destroy the world? Wake up, the Qing dynasty has already perished. Oh, no, your Darkness Empire has already perished for 25,000 years. What old and young? They just couldn't see reality clearly. Back then, Sargeras was able to destroy you ancient gods once. Even if he's not representing the Pantheon now, do you think he'll share this planet with you, Enzos? He had no idea what Enzos was doing here. However, it was clear that the corrosive jadeite dream was an important part of Enzos' grand scheme. If it wasn't for the system scan, Duque would never have known that Savi's afterimage actually contained a massive amount of decaying energy. This amount was probably enough to pollute the Emerald Dream 10 times over. If by any chance Duque was really foolish enough to go up and fight Savis, then after beating Savis up in minutes, what awaited him was self-destruction. After Savis enlarged, his big belly was filled with highly concentrated pus. They were all contaminants on the mental plane. Once he encountered it, it would be 10,000 times worse than indoctrinating a little girl who believes in Santa Claus into Japanese action movies. If Duque really touched it himself, he would be brainwashed like his good comrade, Earth Guardian Nesario, in minutes. If Duque didn't take the bait, Enzo's fishing tactic naturally wouldn't work. When a certain someone used the smallest price to defeat the final boss of Savi's afterimage, he then broke through another situation. On the other side, Izura was almost kneeling. Izura tried his best to swing his claws, but he could not stop Cenarius' attack. No. Damn it, you. Tentacle play was really exciting. If not for the fact that Izura was still in his dragon form, even the most perverted bards wouldn't dare to describe this scene. It was just as Duque had predicted. Izura was at an absolute disadvantage. Due to the damage to his soul, he was unable to use dream magic, so Izura could only fight like the progenitor dragon. Unfortunately, after shrinking in size, all of her claws, tail strikes, wing strikes, and even dragon bites became much less powerful. The only bright spot was that Izura's dragon breath of nature had actually purified many of Cenarius' summoned creatures. There were a few dryads who had been purified, the forest sisters who were deer and knew some nature magic, and Malfurion. Duque didn't expect that Malfurion would come here. He had no time to ask why Malfurion was here. After all, according to the system, Malfurion was only at half health, and he still had a lot of magic power. As long as a great druid with a huge amount of mana still had a breath left in him, he would be able to replenish his HP and recover in no time. Duque raised his hand and a huge ice shield blocked the thorns that Cenarius threw at Malfurion. Malfurion was stunned. He then saw Duque and nodded at Duque. Duke no longer cared about the great druid with the oily green head and turned to attack Cenarius. Roar. Corrosion. Madness. Only nightmares are eternal. Cenarius raised his hands and shouted a bunch of nonsense unique to psychopaths. Duque didn't feel anything. As a modern industrialist, he was destined to never be in the same boat as a naturalist. With a thought, dozens of flame blades appeared out of thin air and slashed at the tentacles and thorns that the fallen Cenarius had created. The next second, Duque was shocked. The flames were very effective against the rotten tentacles and vines. They burned off the tentacles that wrapped around Izura in the blink of an eye. But in less than 1/100th of a second, more rotten vines grew out of thin air and continued to wrap around Izura's body, getting tighter and tighter. Izura's neck was suffocating. Transform. Duque shouted. No, Izura refused. Turning into a human meant that she had given up this battle forever. Cenarius had a special meaning to her. He's not Cenarius. Duque suddenly added. He's. Izura was so shocked that she even forgot to struggle. Yo, Enzos, you're finally willing to show up. Even if it's just a small part. Duque sneered at the seemingly violent Cenarius who kept using dark plant magic. Time seemed to freeze. Izura was the former master of this world after all. She began to use her strongest senses to examine this fallen, adopted son, in front of her. The next moment, without even greeting Duque, her still huge body suddenly shrunk. Duke didn't let Izura's decision go to waste. With a stretch of his hand, a mage's hand larger than a human appeared out of thin air and pulled Izura back into his night elf form. Almost as soon as she was pulled into Duque's arms, Izura collapsed again. As expected, fighting with a damaged soul was too much of a burden for her. On the other side, Cenarius had a stunned expression on his face, and then he laughed sinisterly. He. How interesting. Duke Marcus, I'm really getting more and more interested in you. His voice became extremely deep and thick, like thunder, like a drum, and even more so had a coldness that transcended the mortal world. It was a lofty arrogance that looked down on all life in the world. Hey! Enzos, this is our first greeting. I thought you would hide in a dark corner forever and not come out. Duque held Isra, who was panting heavily from exhaustion, and stared at Cenarius, who had Enzos well attached to him. Cenarius shook the huge index finger of his right hand. No, no, no. According to you humans, I'm a chess player. For a chess player to be reduced to being a chess piece, isn't that a bit too degrading? Wow. What you said makes a lot of sense. Do I need your autograph? Hee hee. Duque turned on his mocking mode. Do you think Sardras will treat you as a chess player? Enzos was speechless. As an ancient god, he thought highly of himself and looked down on everyone. Apart from occasionally colluding with his old companions who were also ancient gods, Enzos really hadn't been happy with anyone. In the era of the Dark Empire, the various ancient gods didn't give in to each other and fought each other. As for Sardras, it would be a lie to say that he didn't hate him. The descent of the pantheon had destroyed the dreams of the ancient gods. Even if Sardras had fallen, would Sardras look up to Enzos, who had lost to him in the past? The one who understood someone the most was definitely their enemy. Chapter 2020. According to Sardras's personality, even if he cleared out all the righteous forces on Azeroth, he would still pull Zoth out of the planet's core and beat him up. Zotha's turtle-like fighting style was meaningless against Sardras. Duque and the rest couldn't possibly tear down Azeroth and turn it upside down to drag him out. Sardras was different. At most, he would blow up the entire planet after he got his hands on the good stuff on Azeroth. Zoth was rendered speechless by Duque. In any case, he already knew that he couldn't do anything to Duque this time. Therefore, he didn't even reply and retreated cleanly. He didn't even say anything harsh. Without a sound, he let his remaining consciousness withdraw from Cenarius's body. My brother Enzo, a ruthless god, doesn't talk much. Almost as soon as Zotha's consciousness left, the fallen Cenarius charged over like a wild horse with an anus prolapse. Duque really wanted to describe this fallen demigod in the form of a centaur or something. Unfortunately, Cenarius was howling as if he was on steroids. As he ran, he left behind large clumps of corrosive substances. These were all the rotten substances that were originally sealed in his body to increase his power of corruption. But once Zoth left, in order to disgust Duque, he pulled out a plug. Cenarius charged forward while leaving behind a pile of things. Not only were there green and yellow smelly pollutants, but there were also things that looked like internal organs. This was clearly an anus prolapse. Sigh, what rotten land, rotten world, I hate coming to places like this the most. Duque's left hand carried the half-collapsed Isra. He raised his right hand's middle finger, and index finger. A spark appeared. In half a second, in this world where one could do whatever they wanted as long as they had enough mental strength and imagination, a monstrous fire was ignited. From the edge of his field of vision to the front of Duque's feet, as long as he looked in the direction of Cenarius, all he could see were blazing flames. Endless flames that connected the sky and the sun. Burn your demigod, Motherf ****. The fallen Cenarius continued to shout, shouting words that even he himself did not know what they were. However, the sea of fire quickly caught up to him, burning his 4 legs that were oozing pus and igniting his shoulders and antlers that were covered in fiery red crystal clusters. Wow! Pairs of flaming hands appeared one after another, clawing at Cenarius' body. Almost every claw tore off large chunks of rotten flesh from his body, rapidly charring the wounds. However, new flaming hands grabbed at the huge Cenarius, rapidly roasting him. It was a charge of death. After a few steps, Cenarius lost his balance and fell to the ground. That was the bad thing about 4-legged guys who were too big. Once their legs were broken, they would be dead on the spot. He randomly summoned rotten thorns and other messy things in an attempt to attack Duque. Unfortunately, he couldn't, and neither could his summons. As a demigod with a strong inclination towards support, his greatest characteristic was his ability to reduce energy consumption. When the enemy's attack exceeded his recovery ability, his defense could ignore his attack methods. In that case, the title of Tire Killer would lose its meaning. Cenarius was still struggling in vain, but his cries made Isra tremble. Malfurion, who was watching this scene from afar, felt sad. The great druid knelt on the ground. He looked blankly at Cenarius, who was struggling in the sea of flames and walking towards death. The fall and death of Cenarius was definitely a huge blow to the druid sect. The first time he was killed by Grom's axe, it could still be said that Cenarius wasn't a battle-type demigod. But this fall would directly affect all the druids in the Cenarian circle. Malfurion suddenly felt lost and emotional about the unknown road ahead. He looked at Isra, who was crying softly on Duque's shoulder, and thought to himself, I'm afraid the future of the druids will fall on the Green Dragon Queen's shoulders. The death of the fallen Cenarius symbolized the collapse of the last point of corrosion in the Emerald Nightmare. In the entire dream world, whirlpools of various sizes suddenly appeared in countless places. These whirlpools sucked in all the corrosive things. At a speed visible to the naked eye, the Emerald Dream was recovering. Duque sighed. This was the Emerald Dream, the magical spiritual world left behind by the Titans, the natural blueprint of Azeroth. Without the source of corrosion interfering, the Emerald Dream's own recovery ability was enough. There was no need for external forces to restore it. Historically, after defeating Savis, when Elune took away Isra's purified soul, the Emerald Dream recovered its beauty. Although this battle had started anticlimactic, the key was that Duque had cut off the possibility of the corrosion spreading further at the first opportunity. When Duque saved Isra, it meant that Zoth could not destroy the entire Emerald Dream at the fastest speed possible. This was the key of all. Duque suddenly noticed that there was a brilliant orange glow on Cenarius's charred remains that dissipated with the wind. He was no stranger to this glow, but he did not expect that he would be so lucky as to obtain another divine artifact. With a wave of his hand, the magician's hand naturally helped him pick up the item. Norganon's foresight, a pair of divine-made shoes. Magic should be regulated, managed, and controlled. At the same time, it should be understood and cherished, not left on the shelf. You must thoroughly understand this contradiction. This inscription carved in the Titan language on the heel of the shoe sounded quite sophisticated. Duque did not care. At his level, he already had his own unique understanding of magic. What Duque really valued was the speed of elemental condensation provided by this pair of divine artifact shoes. The Titan rune magic circle attached to it had a tactic that could gather arcane and other elements at a higher speed. This tactic was like the Alliance's army, which was still using diesel as fuel, suddenly being upgraded to the level of small-scale nuclear power. The magnitude of the improvement was obvious. As expected, a divine artifact related to the Pantheon Titan was awesome. Almost as soon as the divine artifact shoes were in his hands, Duque subconsciously wanted to kiss the beauty in his arms. This time, Duque braked. There was no way. Malfurion, that third wheel, was still watching. Go back, Duque said. Although weak, Isra said resolutely, go back? Go back where? This is my duty, the Emerald Dream that I swore to protect with my soul and life. You have to at least recover. Duque interrupted her. You've already cut off your connection with the Emerald Dream. And do you think that Zoth really left without leaving any spies in the Emerald Dream? Don't be naive. He can still invade this place when you're at your peak. You're so weak now. As soon as I leave, you'll fall. This time, the Emerald Dream is really finished. Chapter 2021. In theory, Isra would recover the fastest if she stayed in the Emerald Dream. However, the defense of the Emerald Dream was weak and useless. Enzos was a troublemaker. As long as Duque dared to leave, Isra would be left alone. Next time, Isra and the Emerald Dream would be destroyed together. Isra was completely stunned. She never thought that one day, it would be her, the King of Dreams. Leaving the Emerald Dream would be the best way to deal with this place. The guilt of wanting to fulfill her duty, but having to abandon it, almost made her break down. Alright, maybe you're right. I'll go discuss it with my sister. Isra lowered her head. Then, do you have any suggestions on how to quickly recover from soul damage? Duque was stuck. His own physique was definitely a wonder. He could absorb other soul elements and turn them into his own soul without destroying the essence of his own soul. He seemed to be the only one in the world. Isra, you should go talk to Alun. Alright. Duque first opened a portal and sent Isra back to the Sleeping Dragon Temple. Then he brought Malfurion back to Darnassus and handed him over to Tyrande at the Moon Goddess Temple. Seeing her childhood friend return safely, Tyrande was very happy. Oh, Duque, thank you so much. Ever since Tyrande stepped down as High Priestess and gave the position to Chandris, she continued to rule the Night Elves as Alun's representative. Tyrande had been freed from many restraints. As long as it was not a public occasion, she did not mind showing off her close relationship with Duque. Right in front of Malfurion, Tyrande generously kissed him. Malfurion was already used to it. There was no loneliness, only calmness. Lord Marcus, thank you again for your help. The Cenarian Circle still needs me, so I'll take my leave first. You guys continue. Malfurion bowed and left. Tyrande, who had gotten carried away, felt a little embarrassed. Only the two of them were left. Duque briefly explained the situation in the Emerald Dream. Has Cenarius finally fallen? Yes. Sigh. Tyrande let out a long sigh. Fortunately, we managed to avoid the worst. However, the Green Dragon army was also half destroyed. To maintain the anti-Titan circle, Isra's dragon aspects were indispensable. I hope she can recover soon. Faced with this result, Duque also had a headache. Enzos had definitely gone overboard this time. What good would destroying the anti-Titan array formation do him? This was practically lighting up the latrine, looking for shit. Now that Boss Saw was here, he wouldn't have it easy either. Did he really think that the Justice faction was stronger than the Burning Legion? He really didn't know how the brains of these ancient gods worked. Are there any other opportunities? I feel like we're being too passive. Tyrande's words made sense. Duque was also having a headache. The war on the Broken Islands had been progressing steadily. The Alliance began to build frontline bases in all directions of the islands. However, the battle situation had always been at a stalemate. For every meter that the front line was pushed forward, they had to pay the price of dozens or even hundreds of soldiers' lives. Outside the Broken Islands, the entire world was mobilized. Almost 24 hours a day, the various B squadrons were in a state of exhaustion, busy intercepting the Burning Legion's assault battleships and planet destroyers. The opportunity is coming. I believe the Pantheon won't miss this. There were as many things to do as a mountain. Duque returned to Karazhan first. Even though he was able to destroy everything in the Emerald Nightmare, those ultimate moves were quite taxing on him. This wasn't like in the game. After using up all his mental power, it would not affect him at all. He could slowly replenish it himself. This was just like when he was immortal, he could pull 2 all-nighters in a row. Phew. Vanessa, I just finished dealing with the Jade Nightmare and had a confrontation with Enzos. I'm exhausted. Rest for a while. Don't call me if there's nothing major about the frontline collapsing. Yes, I understand, Master. Ever since entering this time, Vanessa had become much more obedient. She was no longer the little girl who often threw tantrums. Demigods were not invincible. Even with a demigod's body, they would still die. Cenarius's death shook the entire Alliance camp. A few years ago, when Vanessa realized that the fate of the entire Alliance, and even the entire Azeroth, rested on Duque's seemingly delicate shoulders, her attitude towards Duque had become much better. Duque fell asleep. It was rare for him to sleep not out of habit, but out of an instinctive need as a living creature. Just like the gods of the wilderness who recovered themselves after their life destruction in the Emerald Dream. As he fell asleep, Duke vaguely felt a woman who was not unfamiliar come over to him. What a nice smell. Duque didn't care and hugged her like a human pillow. When Duque woke up after sleeping for a day and a night, he was covered in cold sweat. 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 A waterfall of sweat. Oh my, why is it Isra? He had to say that the ultimate transformation spell was amazing. Although Isra was still in the human form that Duque was familiar with, without the iconic dragon horns and the facial lines that Duque didn't like, other than the long ears and eyebrows, Isra was no different from a human. Much more pleasing to the eye. But why did you come to my place? You're awake? Good morning. Oh, good evening. Isra's voice was still as pleasant as ever. By the way, this is my bedroom, my bed, right? Just in case, Duque confirmed the surroundings. That's right. Then why did you come here? Duque was too embarrassed. Because it was too convenient, he had his arm around her shoulder and his claws were on her waist. No, I had something to talk to you about. But after I relaxed, I suddenly felt very lonely, so I learned from you humans and snuggled together. Actually, I realized that it felt pretty good. Her face clearly said, I don't really understand you humans, but Isra's lonely eyes suddenly stabbed into a soft spot in Duque's heart. Involuntarily, Duque hugged Isra tightly. Are you better now? I still feel a bit better. Duque couldn't help but use more strength. How about now? Phew. Isra's breath blew on Duque's neck. It was a bit ticklish. Unknowingly, smelling the faint fragrance in the magical green hair, Duque felt a bit restless. Suddenly, Isra raised her head. Can you kiss me? I want to see what it feels like to kiss you. She used the most sincere emotions to say these slightly lost words, but the tears in the corners of her eyes were crystal clear. The kind of aura that made people unconsciously want to love her easily broke down Duque's defenses. Chapter 2022. What did a dragon's tongue feel like? Duque was one of the few people in the world with experience. He just wanted to say that a dragon's tongue that could lengthen when needed and was extremely flexible was definitely a bug. Normally, no ordinary person would put their limbs into a dragon's mouth. What was the difference between that and sending food? But thinking about it, this was very similar to circus performers putting their heads and hands into the mouths of lions and crocodiles. The rapid secretion of adrenaline. The kind of anxiety where your heart instantly accelerated to 200 beats per minute and your life was hanging by a thread. It was so exciting. Even though he knew that Isra wouldn't harm him, Duque couldn't help but get excited first. And this dragon's tongue wasn't the usual dragon's tongue. Unlike Onyxia, who had been tamed countless times, Isra came on her own. That soft touch, mixed with the feeling of a soft girl like Kalia and the forbidden pleasure of conquering a dragon, made Duque a little unable to take it anymore. Yeah. Chirp chirp. Isra responded to Duque immaturely. After a long time, Duque finally escaped from the dragon's mouth. Isra, this seems. Actually, Duque was using what little rationality and integrity he had left to support himself. He felt that it wasn't good. Although it seemed very fair for a hero to save a damsel in distress, she was Isra, the Green Dragon King. It just felt a little weird. Isra tilted her head and revealed a sweet yet adorable expression. No wonder Oni said that you're a swordsman. Swordsman? Damn, wait, did that guy really say that? You actually asked her about me. God, what are you guys thinking? Isra didn't answer Duque. She directly used her ultimate move. Teasing the sword. This was no longer teasing. She started with a dragon tongue. Damn. So exciting. With his life hanging by a thread, Duque struggled with all his might, pressing the dragon's head and pushing it out, but Duke's godly sword stabbed toward the dragon's throat, back and forth. After countless rounds, Duke finally used his ultimate move. Great Summoning. Deoxyribose Knights. Without giving Isra any time to react, Duke pulled on the dragon's leg and flipped the humanoid dragon over. The still incomparably sharp Duke godly sword turned into a dragon-taming whip and attacked the dragon's lair continuously. Dragon Slayer Sword. Tap and stab. With a moment of carelessness, Duke shook out a 999 combo. The dragon's roar almost pierced through the roof. Seeing that he couldn't win, Isra, who had started the war, chose to retreat strategically. Who would have thought that Duke, who had the upper hand, would not let go? He grabbed the dragon's waist and bit the dragon's nape, activating backstab. The giant dragon completely collapsed, crying and begging for mercy. Unfortunately, Duke was relentless. After a total of 2,333 consecutive stabs, he finally let go of the dying giant dragon. Grabbing Dragon's peak with his hands, he bit the back of Isra's neck as if he was grinding his teeth. Duke could feel Isra changing with every bite from Duke. From the initial discomfort, to letting him do whatever he wanted. This feeling was awesome. Biting the back of his neck, Duke ordered, "From today onwards, you're my dragon." Yes. You can't let other dragons touch you anymore. Yes. After a long while, Duke hugged Isra and asked, "Why did you do this?" "Nothing. I felt that you would like it this way, so I wanted to try it. I wanted to do it, so I did it. Anyway, it felt good." Duke was a little stunned. Sure enough, each dragon was different. Onyxia was a classic case of having too many ideas. Isra was completely emotional. As for how his relationship with Isra came about, Duke was also very confused. Just as Isra said, it felt good. Inexplicably, a giant dragon had joined the harem. Duke did not know what to tell his wives about such a muddled matter. But obviously, Onyxia had raised all 4 claws in agreement, and Tyrande would probably agree. As for the rest, he did not want to think about it. Where are you going next? Isra had become his dragon, and Duque was naturally even more anxious. I still have a little bit of dragon aspect power left, and can barely maintain the anti-Titan formation on the planet. But I want to rest here for a while. I've asked Alun and Sister Alexstrasza. They said that if there is a way to quickly repair damage to the soul in this world, it's with you. Suddenly remembering something, Isra suddenly became nervous. She hurriedly waved her hands. No, I'm not trying to threaten you. I just want to do it. As for seeking treatment, the Dragon Slumber Church and I both have a lot of savings, we are willing. Duque laughed and hugged Isra, who was a little incoherent because of nervousness. He took a deep breath and said, "Silly. You're already my dragon. How can I leave you alone?" Duque had tried to replenish his own soul power many times. It was Duque's first time replenishing another being, a demigod at that. This was not an easy task. Duque asked the system elf, and the answer he got was that if Duque could collect a large number of female dragons, preferably green dragon soul fragments, as raw materials, and purify them, he could theoretically transfer them to Isra. In the following days, Duque went to the Emerald Dream many times, looking for dragon soul matter like picking up trash. Isra's dragon soul was damaged by 36%, which was quite an exaggerated ratio. Under normal circumstances, most beings would become crazy or something. Duque spent a week to barely gather all the materials he needed. When Isra opened her mind and let Duque enter her soul to search her memories and compare her soul matter. After another 3 days of preparation, Duque finally succeeded in repairing Isra's soul. The treatment was quite successful, but not 100%. Because a certain bastard's hand trembled, and accidentally spilled 30 g of third-grade porn into Isra's soul. Fortunately, it was just a cosplay series. Then that night, Duque saw Isra dressed as a nurse. What was even more ridiculous was that Onyxia actually took advantage of the fact that the battle above had slowed down to sneak back and put on a battle of the two dragons. What battle? It was the blade of Duque's godly sword. If it wasn't for the flames of war raging outside, Duque, this unambitious and unprincipled bastard, would probably be hiding in Karazhan and not coming out. Sigh. Other heroes couldn't even get a powerful mount if they wanted it. Look at Kudrin Wildhammer next door, he had been showing off for decades with a Griffin King. Duque, on the other hand, didn't even look at the leader's standard pure-blooded fire eagle. Because his mount was first the Black Dragon Princess, then the King of Dreams. One person occupied 2 of the 5 dragon aspects. Duque was definitely the only one in the world. Duque played dragon taming every day, and there was a big reason. I'm healing the dragon aspect Isra, otherwise Azeroth's anti-Titan array will collapse. Chapter 2023. The leaders of the Alliance who did not know the situation were moved. Their commander was working too hard. Not only did he have to resist the invasion of the Emerald Dream by the ancient god Enzos, but he also had to use his soul to heal the Green Dragon Queen in order to protect the sky formation of Azeroth. In reality, Duque only waved the dragon taming whip to explore the mysteries of the dragon's lair, and instantly sent out the Deoxyribos Knights to occupy the dragon's lair again and again. Duque's harem who knew the truth all sent congratulatory messages. Queen Sylvie said, by the way, don't tell me you're going to deal with Alexstrasza too? No, I don't have the guts. Kalia said, do I have another sister? That another word was a little hurtful. Jaina said, alright, your Karazhan territory is huge. Prepare a few more dragon lairs this time. Wait, prepare a few more. What did that mean? Elucia said, let me say this first, Arathor's gold is an important collateral. If you don't want your economy to collapse, don't create a dragon nest full of gold coins. Pfft. Was Isra such a shallow dragon who slept on a bed of gold coins? Imriel said, I will recommend the dragon horn sheath to Sister Isra. I accidentally pricked you with my horn last time. Wait, she had the ultimate transformation spell to remove dragon horns. Anyway, Duque was tired. He wanted to suppress the expansion of his harem, but the godly sword had to see blood. It all depended on when Duque's godly sword turned into a dragon blood sword. Just like that, another 3 days passed before Varian sent news. He had successfully rescued Odin. Odin said that he has important information about the Pantheon and wants me to meet him personally. Duque was stunned. Yes. Odin said so. And very seriously, he wants the Guardians and Dragon aspects to send at least 5 representatives to meet him. Meet. This word was so harsh. Usually, meeting with someone of high status like the king would be a charity to those of low status. What did Odin think of the Guardians of Azeroth and the strong natives of the various families? Followers who could come and go at his beck and call? Or did he really think that he was the god King Odin from Earth? Duque immediately understood the crux of the matter. Odin, don't be fooled by how fierce he is. He was also known as the chief protector of Odor, but in reality, there was not a single protector in Odor who cared about him. You, Odin, can do whatever you want. We Guardians will do our own thing. It was precisely because of this relationship that Odin was so angry that he almost had a stroke on the spot. Oh, he died of a stroke. Duke maliciously cursed Odin for his downfall. It was a pity that the saying, good people don't live long, but scourges live for 1,000 years could not be perfectly applied to Odin, but it could still be applied to some extent. In order to confirm his conjecture, Duque directly contacted the Thunder Guardian Torim and Alexstrasza. Oh, Odin has returned. He wants us to have an audience with him as soon as he returns. What do you think? The Red Dragon Queen's face was nervous. Duque, you know, the meaning of our existence is to fulfill the duties given to us by the Titans. In fact, the Dragon Sleeping Temple has a set of mechanisms. Just now, the Dragon Sleeping Temple received a set of high-level secret orders, which also requires us, the guardian dragons, to send representatives to Odin. Duque whistled. How high is it? Can it be higher than the observer, Orgarin? The Red Dragon Queen was silent. She could not answer. Sometimes, refusing to answer a question was the best answer. That meant he was taller than Olgaron. One had to know that Odin's original hidden boss, Orgarin, in theory, had the right to initiate a world purification and kill all the creatures on planet Azeroth. He was equivalent to the great Celestial Empire's ancient imperial envoy. On the other side, Torim was also silent. Guardians can be allowed to have their own will, but it is limited to their duties. No Titan creation can violate the mission given by the Pantheon. Unless, like Nesario, the Deathwing who Enzos forced to become Deepwell Ice with his whispers, or Loken, the king of wisdom who brainwashed Yogg-Saron, a complete degenerate. Duque shrugged, looking helpless. Since everyone is unhappy with Odin and has to go due to their duties, I have a small suggestion here. Oh. Torim was surprised. Tell me about it. Alexstrasza was the most enthusiastic. She felt that the Red Dragon Queen had suddenly turned into a cute, beast-eared girl, wagging her tail. In fact, everyone knew who Odin represented. However, there were some people in the world who felt good about themselves and had no idea about their own abilities and actions. When Odin caused the Guardians of Odin to split up, how dare they say that they had no responsibility at all? And then oppose Tyr's decision to grant the Ancestor Dragon Titan divine power and turn it into a guardian dragon. The dragon's sleeping temple would be unhappy with Odin? Stop joking. Seeing that the magic mirror images of the big bosses on both sides were looking at him with longing, Duque smiled like a fox. No, according to legend, Odin's Sky Fortress is an amazing sky fortress. I think we can't be rude when we go to meet someone. Wait. It's not appropriate to use Naxxramas and the Dalajan for this kind of thing. It was true that Torim was the king of lightning, but he was too honest. Otherwise, why would he foolishly go to the Church of Wisdom to find Loken even though he knew he was no match for them? No, trust me, Torim. Duque is definitely a very powerful kid, and it won't affect the overall situation. The Red Dragon Queen actually looked more confident than Duque. Duque laughed. Leave it to me this time. Yes, I can even entrust my sister to you. Of course I trust you. A certain unreliable big sister shouted, and Isra, who was hiding at the side, blushed on the spot. Torim was speechless. Duque was speechless. So awkward. What to do? Urgent. Waiting online. The next morning, Storm Fjord. This place used to have the most chaotic storms and the most chaotic elemental energy flow. But recently, the crimson sky and the sky fortress that was hanging high in the sky, just enough for mortals to see from the ground, were the only main theme here. Outside the magnificent Martyr's Palace, a bright red carpet was laid out. One by one, they had white wings, wore armor, and looked like battle angels, and stood in neat rows on both sides of the red carpet. Sitting on the supreme throne of the Martyr's Palace, Odin, who had a huge body of 10 stories tall, was dressed in armor and looked extraordinary. However, his right index finger kept tapping on the armrest of the throne. His subordinates all knew that Odin was in a bad mood at the moment. The appointed time for the audience was approaching, but in theory, none of the guardians who were supposed to come were in sight. Odin had even, thoughtfully, prepared messengers and magic arrays on the ground opposite the sky fortress. Chapter 2024. A Hongmen banquet had to have a Hongmen banquet's grandeur. At every support point, there was a large group of fully armed Wagri waiting on them. No one who could become a Wagri was weak. Powerhouses who had not stepped into the hero realm would not be favored. This was also the tragedy of the Vrykul. For 25,000 years, every Vrykul hero would have their souls forcibly taken away after death. Some Vrykul who dared to resist the Vrykul's palace were forcibly killed and turned into Wagri while they were still alive. Of course, the result was that the Wagri were extremely powerful. In history, the first Wagri, which Heria was definitely a demigod. She might be weak among demigods, but it was undeniable that her combat strength had indeed crossed the threshold of the god realm. As for Aurelia, Jalma Stratholme, and Quartermaster Ranov, these NPCs that the warrior players were familiar with, they had at least the strength of a legendary hero here. They were just a step away from transcending the mortal world. Rustle. In the hourglass, the last bit of sand was about to fall through the funnel-shaped opening into the lower layer. Odin was getting more and more impatient. He felt that he was being insulted. He had used the name of that person to summon the native powerhouses of this world and the guardians who should listen to his orders in theory. How could they be so negligent? Did they still remember their duties? Did they still think that the Supreme Pantheon Temple's seneschal was a big deal? Odin clenched his right fist. There were 3 minutes left at most. All of a sudden, the airspace around the sky fortress started to fluctuate in a wide area. Odin stood up abruptly. His face was ashen as he cried out in shock, "Are these people rebelling?" Beside him, his first servant, Supreme Commander Heria of the Wagri, had a complicated expression in her eyes. Her soul had been completely controlled. She could not resist Odin's will at all, but it did not mean that she could not enjoy Odin's embarrassment. The huge spatial ripple would be a magnitude 12 earthquake if it were on the ground. If it were on the sea, it would undoubtedly cause a huge tsunami and the legendary 100-meter-tall waves. However, in the sky, the impact was limited. 3 gigantic man-made objects began to reveal themselves from the illusion. The first thing that appeared on the left was a huge temple that stood on the pure white snow plains. The area of the towering round tower was reduced by each level. Each level seemed to be mounted on a cylindrical building with a golden dome and huge pillars. Divine golden radiance shone from every hall or tower within the inner sanctum. Countless giant dragons flew in a neat formation, circling around the divine temple. This was undoubtedly the dragon's slumber shrine. Then, another temple appeared on the right. It stood on the towering ice mountain peak. Between the 2 towers that reached into the clouds, there was a golden vortex gate filled with psychedelic colors. If one were to pay close attention, they would also be able to see the gigantic runic pillars and glorious city walls that were built in the size of the Titans. Looking at it, Odin's right eyelid twitched uncontrollably. Of course, he knew who this was, Odin's holy land of Titans. The one that Odin couldn't stand the most was the one that appeared last. Why did you appear after the dragon slumber shrine and Odin? Doesn't that mean you're the boss, you're the leader of Azeroth? Regardless of whether Odin was happy or not, a huge and exquisite wizard tower appeared in Odin's vision just like that. Compared to Odin's and the dragon's slumber shrines, the wizard tower appeared more slender. It was protected by 6 secondary towers, supported by arcades and cantilevered structures. The main tower of this mage tower was like a launch vehicle on Earth, but it was also a bit like a huge rapier, piercing through the heavens and the earth. Odin had done his homework. He knew that this wizard tower belonged to Duke Marcus, the world's most powerful wizard, and also the biggest thorn in his side of the plan. Humph. Odin snorted coldly, full of anger. The 3 huge buildings did not appear in the sky of the sky fortress in the form of projections. 3 huge space tunnels with a diameter of more than 200 meters connected these 3 buildings that were located in different parts of the world to the sky fortress in the sky of the endless ocean. This high level of space magic and this seemingly endless magic power was in itself a kind of demonstration. 3 long and wide tunnels extended from the entrances of the 3 buildings, like the gangplank used to board a ship. On the left was a gigantic red dragon. It was striding elegantly along the long, suspended passage that was less than a meter thick. It felt like her body was so huge that the board under her feet might collapse at any time. On the right was the Thunder Guardian Tarim, who was holding a giant hammer, and the Frost Guardian Hodier, who was holding a giant frost axe. The most eye-catching thing for Odin was the one in the middle. It was an elemental giant that was even bigger than Odin. The purplish-blue Titan energy, the snow-like frost elements, and the fiery red and blazing fire elements presented a perfect harmony on the body of this elemental giant. 3 figures were on the elemental crown on the giant's head. The one sitting on the elemental throne in the middle was a young man with a faint smile on his face. On his left was a woman wearing a red mage robe with black edges. She had a noble temperament and an undisguised charm. On the right was a night elf with emerald green hair who was only wearing a breastplate, leather pauldrons, and trousers. If not for the pair of large curved dragon horns on her head, one would really think that she was an elf at first glance. The surging dragon aura from both of them made Odin think, "Are you King kidding me? 5 guardians and a dragon aspect, no more, no less." The mortal representative was also here, and there was only one person, Duque. Oh, no, it was only then that Odin noticed that there was actually a strange-looking machine behind the elemental giant. He could sense that there was a powerful mortal inside. William, the mortal powerhouse who had saved him from Gila's imprisonment. Originally, Odin had quite a good impression of William, but after seeing William's follower appearance and Duque's arrogant attitude, Odin was infuriated. From the huge open door of the martyr's palace, Odin's loud voice could be heard. The dignified guardian dragons of the Titans have become insignificant mortals. You have really thrown away the face of the glorious guardians. Before Duque could speak, Onyxia could not help but say, "Humph. I can do whatever I want. What lousy guardian dragons, if not for Duque asking me to come, I wouldn't even want to come. Let the anti-Titan guardian formation collapse and release the burning legion. Hee, when that time comes, you, the guardian chief, will be the first to die." Chapter 2025. Odin had never seen such an arrogant guardian. The other party was so rude and looked down on his authority. How could he, the chief guardian, put his face in front of everyone? Odin wanted face, and he called himself the noblest existence on this planet. He was already 1 level higher than the other guardians, and 1.5 levels higher than the dragon aspects. Against a second-generation dragon aspect like Onyxia, he would be at a disadvantage and lose his status if he were to personally deal with her. How dare you! No matter how much Heria disliked Odin, Heria could not ignore Odin being rebuked like this. The next moment, she rushed out like lightning and went straight for Onyxia. From the looks of it, she actually wanted to slap Onyxia. Tisk, the black dragon, was full of disdain. From the corner of her eye, she saw that Duque had no intention of making a move. She was prepared to teach this waggery a lesson herself. Who knew that things like acting cool were really hard to describe? Just as Haya was about to pounce over, a cold snort suddenly came from the elemental giant under Duque. Humph. The male voice was as hot as lava and full of anger. Suddenly, a pair of phoenix wings grew out of the elemental giant's back. In less than 1/100th of a second, it had already covered the sky and covered Haya. Bam! As the number 1 waggery under Odin, she was actually not weak. Unfortunately, she was not strong enough in front of the real elemental demigod Kale, who controlled the land of fire for Duque. Even if Kale, was not here, just a remote control of the fire elemental attack was still not something Haya could block. In one exchange, she was flapped by the phoenix wings and returned the way she came. Chief Waggery was blasted to the side of Odin's throne like a cannonball, crashing into countless things. This time, it was Odin's turn to be embarrassed. Humph. A large palm that could easily shatter a heavy tank slammed into the throne. Odin's expression was shockingly ugly. Sensing their master's will, the Waggery, who were originally ceremonial troops, people, drew their swords in unison and glared at Duque and the others. Duque was disdainful as he looked at Wagner, who had the appearance of a mighty birdman. Ouch! You see, Odin on Earth knows how to behave himself. The Valkyries sent out were all beautiful and had hot bodies. They did not rely on coercion to absorb the souls of heroes on the battlefield. During the day, he would be a follower, following the heroes to the battlefield, or he would fight with other heroes in the arena. At night, he would accompany the heroes to the banquet and party all night long. He would drink when he needed to, and he would even take the initiative to serve them in bed late at night. So in countless heroic epics, Valkyrie was the perfect wife or lover in men's hearts. A so-called expert like Odin, who had been brought back by brute force, was useless. Faced with Odin's arrogance, Thorim and Alexstrasza obviously couldn't act out openly. The ugly one, of course, would be Duque. Dumuk snapped his fingers. The sky 10 kilometers away suddenly flashed with a continuous stream of flames. A mere 10 seconds later, countless cannonballs pierced through the sky. However, these cannonballs were extremely accurate, flying above and below the sky fortress. Not a single one hit the protective shield of the sky fortress. After the heavy rain of cannonballs, thousands of elemental channels opened in the sky. The blazing fire element, the heavy water element, the ethereal wind element, and countless elemental creatures stepped out of the elemental channels. They stood on the elemental platforms floating in the air, using their strange elemental eyes to stare at the sky fortress. 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. When the number exceeded 100,000, Odin's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The other party was clearly demonstrating to him, the chief of the guardians of Odin, that they had absolute power and could destroy him at any time. Odin almost couldn't suppress the rage in his heart. He was ready to teach Duque a lesson himself. Just as Odin stood up, his muscles bulging, and countless titan energy attached to his arm muscles like wriggling snakes, Duque suddenly smiled. Odin could be so domineering, of course, because he represented the will of the pantheon. That Amon-Sur was most likely watching everything that was happening here from somewhere. As long as the Titans had some brains, they would not sit by and watch Odin fight with the strongest local force in Azeroth, especially when Duque controlled the 4 major elemental realms. Perhaps the Titans had some thoughts of suppressing the alliance. When they saw how powerful Duque was, even the guardians and dragon aspects that they had set up did not care about Odin. Instead, they seemed to be neutral but actually supported the alliance. Everything would be different. As expected, just as the irascible Odin was about to attack, a deep male voice came from the sky above the sky fortress. A powerful human demigod. Amon-Sur's voice was surprisingly young. Although the age of the Titans was frozen, it was recorded that the pantheon was at least 50,000 years old. Unfortunately, although this voice had a sense of wisdom, at the same time, it revealed an inhuman coldness, as if hinting at the supremacy of its owner, as well as his disregard for the lives of mortals. That was absolute power, the most original source, the source of power that no living being in the world of Azeroth could resist. Wagri, who was beside the red carpet in the sky fortress, the dragons that were flying around the dragon's slumber temple, and the mechanical guardians that were guarding Odin all prostrated themselves on the ground. Even Odin, Thorim, Alexstrasza, and the humanoid Isra either knelt on one knee, placed their right hands on their left chest, or turned into their dragon forms and lowered their proud dragon heads to show their utmost respect to the owner of the voice. Only Duque sat on the elemental throne casually. Beside him was Onyxia, who was unwilling to bow but was intimidated by Amansur's powerful aura. Onyxia was on the verge of collapsing. Duque brazenly pulled the black dragon princess into his arms and used his aura to protect Onyxia. This scene made all the Titan elites feel as if the heavens were falling and the earth was splitting apart. God! That was Amon-Sur. The master of the pantheon, the recognized common god of the entire universe. How could Duque ignore the authority of Amon-Sur and the pantheon? Was he not afraid that the gods would be angry and crush all living beings in the world of Azeroth, including Duque? Even the alliance leaders who were secretly watching the live broadcast through the magician's eyes were scared out of their wits. Their teeth were chattering, and the thought of surrendering rose from the depths of their souls. Only Duke calmly withstood the Pantheon Palace Master's startling aura that was like a falling star. No one knew that in Duque's eyes, Amon-Sur was a special NPC. Chapter 2026. Perhaps Amon-Sur had once gone against the heavens, the earth, and the air, destroying the stars with a flip of his hand, and creating a world with a raise of his hand. He was omniscient and omnipotent. But that was an old story from 25,000 years ago. If the Pantheon was so powerful, and the Titans had the ability to beat Sardras, they wouldn't have had the Pantheon overturned by the traitor Sardras, or been chased around the universe by the Burning Legion, looking for a place to hide. I am the master of the Pantheon, Amon, sir. It was a simple introduction, but the Guardians already knew who the owner of the voice was from the soul connection. Knowing was one thing, but it was another for their master to announce it himself. Almost at the same time that Amon, sir, announced his name, all the Guardians and Dragon aspects at the scene responded in unison. Servant Tarim, XXX, pays his respects to the Supreme Master of the Gods, Amon, sir. The loud voices turned into a torrent, and then converged into an incomparably exaggerated sound bomb that rumbled continuously between the 4 giant buildings connected by the spatial tunnel. Not to mention the Guardians, Dragon aspects, and Titan creations that belonged to the Pantheon, even the Alliance leaders who were watching this scene through the video couldn't help but kneel on the ground. For example, Daneth Trollbane, the Old Wolf King Jean, and Moira Bronzebeard. However, every single powerful existence noticed it. Duque didn't kneel, and didn't even have the most basic etiquette. He just sat on the elemental throne on top of the elemental giant's head without moving. Onyxia, who was beside him, was clearly scared to the point of peeing, but he still held the Black Dragon Princess' slender waist with one hand, not giving her any chance to yield. This was no longer a situation where he was the only sober person in a drunken stupor. This was a situation where everything in the world submitted to him, and even if they were unhappy, they would avoid him. Only Duque showed his unyielding character. Duke Marcus, you are too presumptuous. Odin was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Facing the Supreme Master of the Pantheon, why don't you kneel? Don't forget, you humans are also creations of the Pantheon. Duque looked at Odin as if he was looking at an idiot, then looked up at the gigantic figure in the void. If one were to ignore the powerful divine light surrounding his virtual image, Amon, sir, would look like a kind old man with white hair and a white beard. Dressed in a long white robe with a blue shawl, he looked elegant and noble, unapproachable. Duque ignored Odin and questioned Amon Thul instead. Oh. Dare I ask, to the Pantheon Temple, does it mean that those who don't kneel are enemies? Or could it be that the name of the Pantheon Temple alone could make the billions of races in the universe kneel before them? If this sign is so effective, why don't you just ask Sardras to tie himself up and come here crying and pleading guilty? Duque's words were simply devastating. Apart from Odin, who was about to go berserk with rage, every Guardian and Dragon aspect was dumbfounded. How dare Duque say such a thing? That was Amon, sir. That was the Pantheon that had once beaten all the ancient gods into minced meat. Even if Sardras rose and almost destroyed the order of the entire universe, the Pantheon Temple was still the origin of most intelligent beings in the world. The straightforward Tarim was the first to lose his temper. Duque, the origin of humans in Azeroth is actually closely related to the Guardian of Order, Tyr. Alexstrasza, who was most concerned about Duque, also chimed in. Duque, what are you doing? Didn't we swear to protect Azeroth together? We are the closest allies. What do you think you're doing right now? It sounded like a scolding, but it was actually a great concern from the Red Dragon. Amon, sir's voice stopped for a moment. He was giving the creations of the Pantheon a chance to perform, and at the same time, he was observing Duke Marcus, a low-level intelligent being who had risen to fame in just 30 years. Odin's irritable roar sounded again. According to the laws of the Pantheon, your death should not be regretted. But on account of your contributions against the Burning Legion and the fact that you have severely injured Sardras and Kill, Jaden, I will give you a chance on behalf of the Pantheon. Submit to the Pantheon, or be destroyed. When he heard Odin's words, Duque couldn't help but grit his teeth. If he was still the noob from back then, he would probably have accepted it. Although he hated the feeling that his fate did not belong to him, and although it felt a little uncomfortable to be controlled by the Pantheon. After all, the other party was the legendary omniscient and omnipotent holy existence. Even if they ordered him to carry bricks, there was nothing to be ashamed of. But today was different from the past. I have managed Azeroth so well, and you want to pick the fruits of my labor? To put it bluntly, the Pantheon felt that they were noble and refused to lower themselves to help the mortals like in the game. Or rather, the situation in the game was what made Duque feel incredulous. Why did the titans of the Pantheon have to work for the mortals? So today's confrontation was actually a battle for dominance. Cooperation was necessary, but who would be the leader was another matter. The Pantheon couldn't let go of its pride, and the alliance was not so stupid. The other party threw out the name of the Pantheon and had to kneel on the spot. In the face of Odin's threat, Duque's reaction was, ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Odin, who do you think you are? How dare you represent the Pantheon? Amon, sir, did not utter a word. Do you really think you're a titan? Alright, if the Pantheon is full of idiots who can't see the situation clearly, then we don't have to cooperate. Duke's words were like a giant hammer smashing onto a large bell, causing all the guardians and dragons to feel dizzy on the spot, and they were thrown into a state of confusion. Odin cursed, who do you think you are? Duque retorted, I killed Sargeras. Odin was indignant. That's just his soul. Duque said disdainfully, I killed Jaden. Odin was rendered speechless. Duque was unforgiving and laid out his achievements like a machine gun. I destroyed the Arc Herons. I blew up Sargeras' void fortress. I even got Argus's star key. I've done so many earth-shattering things in 30 years. What have you, Odin, done in 25,000 years? Odin, the great manager of Otter, could not refute Duque's words at all. His face swelled to the color of a pig's liver. At this time, everyone noticed that more and more huge figures were being projected down from the sky above the martyr's palace. They were the other titans of the Pantheon. Duque was not afraid at all. The millions of people in the Alliance and I have fought for so long. Isn't it for freedom and the reproduction of our race? If it's just to change masters and continue to be slaves, we might as well sell ourselves to the Burning Legion. They might even offer a higher price. Chapter 2027. Madman. Have you forgotten where you came from? Odin couldn't help but scold him again. Enough. The one who spoke was another female titan standing beside Amon Thul, Aona the Life-Giver. This Duke Marcus isn't from our universe. This sentence might be the best way to drive a wedge between the two of them. At this moment, many of the leaders of the Alliance felt a huge wave in their hearts. Duque wasn't moved. He even wanted to laugh. If he really hadn't leaked any information, his position in the Alliance would probably be shaken by this overt plot. As history progressed, Duque first revealed his identity to his own harem. He couldn't hide anything from the person who slept with him. The women in his harem were extremely shocked at first, but they quickly accepted this fact. In fact, even the Drenii, who were considered aliens by the people of Azeroth, were here. There was nothing unacceptable about a human from another universe. The ones who leaked the information were the core leaders of the Alliance, such as William, Magni, Muradin, Jurban, and the others. Just as the leaders who didn't have much say were shocked, they saw the calm core leaders of the Alliance. They were shocked to find out that they were still quite a distance away from the core power of the Alliance. Magni was the first to speak in the throne conference. Hey! We can even accept the Drenii, who are from the same race as Eridar. Why can't we accept a human from the Outerverse as our leader? The dwarves will listen to whoever can lead the Alliance to a stronger state and protect our planet. William calmly said, since Uncle Duque thinks that he's a Stormwind person, then he's a Stormwind person. Even the Stormwind people didn't have any objections, let alone the leaders of the other countries. At this moment, many of the leaders realized that Duque was too awesome. Duque's wives were all queens or leaders, and they controlled more than half of the authority in the Alliance. The dwarves, gnomes, and Stormwind Kingdom were not in a mess, so the Gilneas, Stromgard, Pandaren, and other countries or races that had only joined in the last 10 years in various forms and were in fact second tier, would not have any objections. The big shots of the Alliance quickly came to an agreement, and Duque spoke slowly. So what? I am indeed a human. But my lover, my friend, my child, and my beloved planet Azeroth are here. I am willing to pay a high price to protect this beautiful planet. On the other hand, if the Pantheon Temple is unreasonable and demands unfair domination and enslavement, please forgive me for rejecting it on behalf of the millions of intelligent beings in Azeroth. At most, I'll open a portal and send them to the universe I was born in. Aren't you afraid of drawing the Burning Legion into your universe and causing more disasters? Odin retorted. Duque sneered, sorry. An existence like Lord Amon, sir, is known as a Heavenly Father level powerhouse in our world. Although there are not many, there are still 3 to 5 of them in a star system. In particular, we have a guy called Thanos, who can turn half a star system into ashes with a snap of his fingers. If Sargeras dares to go to my side, I really want to see who will win between the two of them. None of the Titans who could make it to the Pantheon Temple were simple. They had their own mysterious power to judge the truth of the other party's words. It was precisely because they sensed that Duque was speaking the truth that the Titans found it difficult to deal with. On the other side, Odin was rebuked again, and he felt his chest tighten. Duque didn't care about Odin anymore. This guy was good at fighting, but he was not as sinister and vicious as the Odin in the legends on Earth. In Duke's eyes, Odin, the Grand Chief of Otter, was just a foot soldier with the word brave carved on his chest. Now, Duque was not afraid of those who had nothing to lose. He could still advance or retreat. If the Pantheon was at its peak, would Amon, sir, talk nonsense with Duque? He would have sent a bunch of guardians to teach Duque how to behave. Even if Duque called him grandpa, he wouldn't let Duque off easily. Unfortunately, times had changed. For a moment, even Amon, sir, couldn't find an entry point to suppress this arrogant demigod. At this moment, Duque raised his head and said, failure isn't scary. What's scary is not being able to turn things around. The Pantheon lost to Sargeras 25,000 years ago. Now, you have the best chance, to join hands with the mortal alliance of Azeroth to deal with the Burning Legion, with equal status and identity. What kind of joke is this? Duque, don't go too far. This time, it wasn't Odin, but Torim and Alexstrasza who couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't their fault. They could accept Otter and the Dragon Slumber Temple cooperating with an alliance that was already rising and had similar strength. Deep down, they still thought that the Pantheon was high and mighty. The glory of the Creator couldn't be tarnished. No matter how high and mighty the Pantheon was, they shouldn't stoop down and be equal to the alliance formed by mortals. Seeing that the other side was about to flip out, Duque threw an even bigger bomb. The Pantheon is very strong, but the premise is that the Titans are still alive. Still alive? Alive? Alive, this news was like a bolt out of the blue. Every Guardian, Aspect Dragon, and even the Alliance leader who heard this news were so shocked that they almost fainted on the spot. What? The Supreme Titans of the Pantheon had actually been annihilated? Everyone guessed that 25,000 years ago, the fall of the Titans' most powerful general, Sargeras, had caught the Pantheon off guard. The Pantheon must have suffered heavy losses. Otherwise, Sargeras and his Burning Legion wouldn't have been able to dominate the universe for so many years. Even though they lost, no one expected the Pantheon to lose so completely. Duque said that the Titans were all dead. Then, who was talking to them now? Duque curled his lips indifferently. Great King of the Gods, Lord Amon, sir, don't tell me you don't even have the courage to admit your current situation and lie to a small indigenous half-god in your eyes? This time, Amon, sir's wife, Iona, couldn't hold it in anymore. How dare you? So what if we lost our physical bodies? As long as we want to, we can resurrect at any time. Her words indirectly admitted the predicament of the Titans of the Pantheon. Yes, they were really dead. These words had undoubtedly shaken the heart of the Guardian who firmly believed that his master was invincible in the world. That was a spiritual attack on the level of raging waves. Unexpectedly, Duque's words shocked them to death. Resurrect? Of course you can. The premise is that you can find a green planet suitable for nurturing life, occupy the planet's core, erase its consciousness, and turn the planet into your new body. Oh. Also, in the 10,000 years that you've regained your bodies, you can't be disturbed by powerhouses like the ancient gods or Sargeras. Otherwise, you're finished. Chapter 2028. At this moment, everyone who heard this had shock written all over their faces. This was especially true for Amon, Sir, the king of myriad worlds, who was trembling uncontrollably. This was too shocking for the Titans. This was the ultimate secret of the Pantheon, and they did not even preserve this method of nurturing Titans in any form. In this world, no one would have such a powerful imagination to imagine something as shocking as a planet being a Titan. Actually, Duque didn't know either. Titans, as the name suggested, were huge humanoid beings. Ordinary guys that were dozens of stories tall were huge for humans, but they still didn't have the right to be called Titans. Just how big was the Titan? When Duque traveled through time and space, he peeked at a certain scene. The background of the scene was Azeroth, but the huge humanoid figure attached to Azeroth was Sargeras. Yes. Sargeras was the size of a planet. Coupled with the fact that during the Primordial War, Duque had personally opened the portal powered by the Well of Eternity to the size of dozens of stories tall, and Sargeras still couldn't pass through the portal, one could imagine how huge Titans were. Even if he used all kinds of spells and abilities, he still couldn't shrink his body to human size. With a planet-sized body, the ability to change worlds and create life, and almost infinite power, this was Titan. Through these conditions, one could see how bad the situation of the Titans of the Pantheon was. Back then, Sargeras, the Titan who was the most capable of fighting, betrayed them and directly destroyed the Titans of the Pantheon. Although it was called the Pantheon, there were actually only a few Titans, less than 2 digits. Being defeated in a direct confrontation, Amon, Sir and the others could be said to have lost all they had left. That's right, Azeroth was their last pair of pants. The seemingly invincible Pantheon Temple had its own laboratories and bases throughout the universe, leaving behind countless guardians. Unfortunately, apart from Azeroth, there was no other planet with an anti-Titan formation. Most guardians were at the level of high-level Void Lords. Under the attack of the Burning Legion's Sea of Demons, the only outcome was death. Duque calmly stated his conclusion. The Pantheon Temple may have been very strong in the past, but today, the only troops that the Pantheon Temple can command are the direct troops in the spaceship called the Pantheon Temple, as well as the Guardians and Dragon aspects like Azeroth. It's no exaggeration to say that the battle in Azeroth is the Pantheon Temple's last hope to turn the tables. If even Azeroth falls, the Pantheon would have no choice but to leave this universe and search for hope and salvation in other universes. Am I right? Lord Amon, Sir. Duque's powerful voice silenced the entire martyr's palace. His words attracted the attention of all beings in the air, including the Guardians, Dragon aspects, and all the low-level servants of the Pantheon. They wanted to know if their duties were still meaningful. Does my glory still exist? Was his almighty master really as distressed as Duque said? Even Amon, Sir, the king of gods, was silent for a moment. A fallen phoenix was no better than a chicken. 25,000 years ago, the Titans who had been glorious and destroyed anyone they saw would never have imagined that they would be in such dire straits. It was not that Amon, Sir and the other Titans had not thought of other ways over the years. Unfortunately, the Guardians who were loyal to them had been killed by the Burning Legion, and their strongholds had been uprooted. When they realized that their creations could not withstand the fallen Titans' demonic army, they had no choice but to hide the Pantheon Temple. In the void of a certain galaxy, a gorgeous palace floated in a well-concealed spatial rift. That was the Pantheon Temple. In the huge temple, several translucent figures gathered together and looked at the tiny human named Duke Marcus on the screen. In the eyes of the Titans of the Pantheon Temple, the peak-level demigod that mortals could not reach was only at the level of a top-level guardian. Faced with Duque tearing apart the Pantheon Temple's last shroud, the Titans were not angry, indignant, or ashamed. Instead, they all looked calm. This was the Titans. Their lifespans were measured in units of 100,000 years, and they were existences that surpassed mortals. Because of their earth-shattering strength and methods that mortals could not imagine, they were called gods. 25,000 years had passed. Perhaps they had been angry, roaring, and complaining when Sargeras had betrayed them and destroyed them. After such a long period of time, all that was left was peace. Looking at Duque's ridiculously young and seemingly easygoing face, which was filled with stubbornness, the Titans chuckled in admiration at his audacity to challenge the Pantheon Temple. Dreamweaver Noganan laughed. The guardians we created have their own thinking abilities and are very powerful. However, they have lost their variables. As long as they are not destroyed, there will be no difference between 25,000 years ago and today. Now, these mortals who have their own will have chosen a human from the outerverse who is more ambitious and daring to negotiate with us. Don't you think that this is also a success for us? It was also because of Noganan's words that the Titans recalled the past that lingered in the deepest recesses of their memories. That was the era when the Pantheon dominated the universe, guiding all life and creating miracles. Even after 25,000 years, they would still dream of that good time every night. Now, a seemingly insignificant existence had pierced through the illusion of the Pantheon Temple. Not only did this not anger the Titans, but it actually gave them a glimmer of hope. Amon Thul spoke. His words were extremely profound. This was because other than the guardians and the dragon aspect, only a mortal like Duque could hear him. The video and sound effects that the other alliance leaders were watching were completely cut off the moment Amon Thul spoke. It seems like you also have a rather powerful ability to pry into time and space. Since you have seen the Pantheon Temple's predicament, there is no need for me to continue maintaining this false strength. Then let us have an honest conversation. After all, be it the Pantheon Temple or your world, they are all so fragile. Maintaining the status quo will not help us defeat the Burning Legion. Amon Thul pointed. Odin, Torim, Alexstrasza, and Duque all felt a part of them suddenly sublimate. It was as if their souls had split into a soul clone and were absorbed into a mysterious domain. They could hear the voices of Amon Thul and the other participants, and they could also speak there. However, most of their senses were still in the Sky Fortress. Amon Thul said, Duke Marcus, tell me your plan. This will determine whether the Pantheon Temple will cooperate with you in the way you want. Chapter 2029. The war that spread across the entire planet of Azeroth was still ongoing. War had now become the only main theme of this planet that had been plagued by disasters for decades. In every corner of the planet, the generals of the Alliance were commanding large fleets to fight against the demons of the Burning Legion. But at this time, the leaders of the Alliance, who were supposed to be the backbone of the various kingdoms and armies, were not in the mood to command. The wind blew from the west of the Endless Sea. On the broken islands that had been ravaged by the flames of war, the forest rustled softly. On Naxxramas, which was not far behind the front line of the battle, the wind seemed to be telling something to the leaders. The leaders were waiting, eager to hear the voice of fate. Unfortunately, the voice of fate was too vague and elusive. Everyone could only sigh from time to time, waiting for the final result. Duque, how dare you? That's Amon, sir. Old Jean smiled bitterly. Maybe I'm really old. If it were me, I would probably agree to the Pantheon's deployment unconditionally. This was normal. Young people were more spirited. When one was old, their edges would be smoothed out by cruel reality. It was easier for them to seek stability and a high probability of winning. William said firmly, he's Duke Marcus. The man who led the Alliance to prosperity. I believed in him before, I believe now, and I will never doubt him in the future. On the other side, Valen's soul was also teaching Imriel. Do you see? That's a leader. It doesn't matter if he's supreme or not, it doesn't matter if he doesn't have to take responsibility for his decisions. As a leader, you must remember that your decision can affect the fate of countless people. Countless people live because of you, and countless people may die because of you. It all depends on your decision. Imriel was a little distressed. It's too difficult to make a decision of that level. After all, it's the Pantheon. Valen was also emotional. Yes. Even I wouldn't dare to force the Pantheon to that extent for the people of Azeroth, even though it might give us the best conditions. Yes. Hoof nodded vigorously. To become a leader like Duque, you need talent, hard work, and even more so, some experiences that cannot be replicated. I have no intention of forcing you to reach the level of Duque. I just want to say that there are many paths in this world, and not all of them lead to hardship. Mentor, you mean? It was rare for Valen to be so frivolous. Actually, your relationship with Duke has already helped Delaney a lot. Tutor, the Hoof was anxious and blushed. The group of queens, on the other hand, had their hearts on Duke. In Lordaeron, Queen Kalia looked at her daughter, Emily, who was happily playing in the garden while looking back at the magic mirror from time to time. I really want to know how the negotiation went. Kalia sighed. In another image, Alicia was also holding her cheeks. It's fine as long as Duque doesn't anger the Pantheon Titan. Queen Sylvie laughed. How is that possible? If he didn't do something, he wouldn't be Duque. Jaina laughed as well. But he has never let us down, has he? On the other side, carrying the hopes of his women, the leaders and soldiers of the Alliance, and the hopes of billions of people in Azeroth, Duque and Amon Sir began to have a frank conversation. Before I tell you my plan, I'll first state the request of the people of Azeroth. Go ahead, Amon Sir replied calmly. In fact, he was already prepared for the Pantheon to bleed. Unexpectedly, Duque did not demand an exorbitant price. Whether it's me or the people of Azeroth, we don't have the intention of dominating the universe. It's enough to be able to live freely on planet Azeroth. If we can destroy the Burning Legion this time, we only need the Pantheon to guarantee this. Yes. Unless it's to destroy demons and evil forces targeting Azeroth, the army of the people of Azeroth will not step out of the planet. It was like this in the past, and it will be like this in the future. After this war, the glory of the Pantheon will once again shine in the universe. Even Azeroth can continue to be a name, claiming to be under the jurisdiction of the Pantheon. If Azeroth becomes the new Titan of the Pantheon in the future, then I hope that she can leave a seed of life for this planet, to ensure that the planet will not wither and be destroyed because of the loss of the star soul and core. Oh. The Titans had their own secret way of communicating. They all felt that Duque really had no desires. You only want this much? Iona felt that it was a little unbelievable. If you're talking about the future, yes. This is enough for the people of Azeroth. But in this war, we mortals need the support of the Pantheon. Duque's words were sonorous and forceful. There's no need to discuss this. As long as we can destroy the Burning Legion, the Pantheon will spare no effort. Tell us your plan, Norganon said. Duque smiled. I don't know if you've noticed, but I once traveled back to Azeroth 10,000 years ago and blew up Sardra's nest in the Twisting Nether during the Battle of the Ancients. This led to an unexpected result. As Duque spoke, the Titan's expressions finally changed. A hint of surprise flashed in Amon Sir's eyes. He couldn't help but take out the Pantheon scepter from the void. The circles of golden Titan runes on the scepter lit up. The air in the Pantheon was filled with an excited atmosphere. The Titans' hearts became excited because of a mortal's proposal. At that moment, the cosmic wind that blew past the Pantheon started to grow stronger. Ah! The wind of the stars. Amon Sir said silently in his heart. It had been 25,000 years, and the Titans had been hiding in this secret place. They didn't take revenge or fight back. They silently watched as their creations and guardians were defeated by the Burning Legion one by one. The reason why Amon Sir made such a decision was because he couldn't see any hope. A grand battle couldn't save the Pantheon Temple and this world. Had 25,000 years really erased the hatred and pain? No. Definitely not. Revenge for a vile person would never be late. It was never too late for the Titans to take revenge. Amon Sir had been waiting for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But he didn't expect this opportunity to be created by a weak mortal in his eyes. Countless existences had proposed plans to defeat the Burning Legion to him. In fact, every plan he heard before was based on a lot of speculation and even imagination. Those fellows didn't even know what Sardra's Achilles' heel was, yet they were spouting nonsense, thinking that they could win this war with their meager forces and the few remaining underlings of the Pantheon. Duque was different. He was reasonable and had evidence. He had to admit defeat. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.